Jarvis, drop my needle.
Hello, this is the hardcore legend Mick Foley, and if you are interested in listening to idiots, you came to the right place. Have a nice day.
Woo! That's an attention getter.
He's a very strange young man.
He's an idiot.
What we're dealing with here is a complete lack of respect for the law.
Oh my God, he's an idiot.
You know, of course, that you're out of your jurisdiction.
Personally, I think you're an idiot.
But that's the evidence in the car.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Always like to keep my audience riveted.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, friends and fiends, and welcome to Free Range Idiocy, the podcast about everything. But it's mostly really just the stuff we like. If it hasn't been blindingly obvious, we're pretty big fans of Ronald D. Moore. Not only did the man cut his teeth working on 3 Star Trek shows, that'd be The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager for those of you keeping score at home, but he also happens to be the mind behind our biggest binky, the 2004 reimagining of Battlestar Galactica. To say his screenwriting and producing credentials are in order would be on par with saying that the man they call Tim enjoys an occasional steak, or that Yankees fans are somewhat overbearing, which is why we're talking about his latest contribution to the bettering of all of our lives, the Apple TV Plus show For All Mankind, or as I like to refer to it, the BSG sequel we all deserved but never got, as we go through the good, the bad, and the ugly. I am your Uncle Todd, and with me, as always, is the man who has studied alternate history so in-depth and for so long that he no longer remembers if he's real or a figment of his own imagination. He has been my partner in idiocy for over 2 decades, and he knows when it's time to bring the cat in. I give you the man they call Tim.
Greetings and salutations, my friend. How are you?
What do you hear, Tim?
All I can think of is look at what the cat dragged in, but that's not what I'm supposed to say.
It's nothing but the rain. Nothing. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
That's
gosh.
it. That's it. You're fired. I'm calling in Jimmy Dice now. That's it. Oh wait, he's probably drunk. Never mind.
I thought you were going to say I'm going to call the Admiral and report you because he'll give me a brisk talking to on that one.
Oh yes, he would. Yeah. Oh,
I apologize.
Eddie would get himself.
Sir. Nothing but the rain.
Grab your gun and bring in the cat. So just to finish that out. Okay.
Sorry. Oh,
that's all right. I'll just deduct that from your royalties payment.
This is an auspicious start to this episode, sir.
Yes. Well, how are you, sir? How is things going for the man they call Tim at your palatial estate on the outskirts of Chicago?
I am well. I am doing well, living the dream, and just day by day, minute by minute, loving life.
That's good. And you know the reason why the man they call Tim is loving life is because he has folks coming in to paint his palatial estate, as opposed to me, some poor schmuck who's just doing it all himself and living in a world of rollers and paintbrushes and half-empty paint cans and
and hallucinating from the fumes.
Well, that's actually the best part, honestly.
That's why he does it.
That's my pleasure. But yes, that's good to hear. Good to hear. And
yes, sir.
Say hello to Michael Jordan. I know that he's one of your neighbors, and they're in your gated community out there in Chicagoland.
I will do so. I believe I'll be celebrating with a steak afterwards as well. And
of course, you
fine bourbon.
Is there anything you don't celebrate with a steak? Anything?
I don't know. I did do some grilling yesterday.
Really?
I did. I got myself a couple of hot Italian sausage links, and they have this patty they make. It's a bacon cheddar. So they have bacon and cheddar cheese all kind of mixed in the meat. And I got me two of those patties and had one of each sausage link and patty last night. Had another for lunch today, and just feeling good.
Once again, the man's blood type is cream cheese, but for some reason his doctor keeps telling him this is good for you. So, hey, whatever,
Keep doing it.
Whatever works.
Keep doing it.
Whatever works.
We'll process the fat, ladies and gentlemen.
Pretty soon, Tim's going to be doing this show from an iron lung. I don't know if that's a thing if you have cholesterol, but I'm sure that he's going to just say, you know what, I want a shiny new thing. Get me an iron lung.
Absolutely. Oh, and quick scooter update. I did get the rear tire popped off. There is one in transit. I will be installing it and hope to be back on the streets, zipping around, and actually using this bad boy for some commute travel to the downtown Chicago area.
In the meantime, he has 4 ushers from Wrigley Field who are now out of work for the winter season, carrying him around in a litter like Cleopatra. It's carrying him back and forth. Unfortunately, those guys are now going to be completely unemployed, and the scooter wheel comes in, so it's a little bit of a dip in the economy.
Issues, I couldn't get the grapes and the fruit for them to feed me while they were, walking me along.
You wouldn't eat them
so.
Anyways. You'd be like, bring me some teriyaki steak.
Steak tips. Give me some steak tips.
That's pretty much what it would be. Oh, my gosh. All right, well, enough about the eating habits and transportation problems of the man they call Tim. We are going to get right into the show here because we've got some stuff to talk about. We have both now completely caught up on For All Mankind, and I'm going to take a little credit for this because I'm the one who kind of hipped Tim to this show. However, we need to address the news, ladies and gentlemen. We are not necessarily timely. We are not even necessarily coherent. But you know what? We still try and keep up on what's going on in the world in a little thing we call the Week in Geek.
The Week in Geek.
Feels so funky.
What do you got for us this episode, sir?
Well, leading off, sir, and this is actually a first for the Week in Geek, believe it or not, because usually we will refer to trailers on YouTube. We will, dip into our rumor mongers at Screen Rant, maybe Giant Freaking Robot. But here, ladies and gentlemen, we are, if nothing else, thorough. And today, or actually last night, Neil deGrasse Tyson on Twitter posted a couple of blurbs, which
Wait a minute, we're actually citing like a legit, we're citing legit smart people on this show now?
We are.
We're going to completely go off brand here. Wait a minute, is this allowed?
Well, not when you understand what he was tweeting about, though.
Okay, proceed, sir.
He was tweeting about friend of the show, and I believe most downloaded episode for Free Range Idiocy.
Yes.
Our Top Gun 2 review with Mr. Tom Cruise, aka Xenu himself.
Awesome. So we're working in the Tom Cruise content early in the show. I like it.
We are.
I like it.
We are getting a little Tom Cruise early in the show, but basically,
in the words of Doc Holliday, then proceed, sir.
Proceed. But Neil deGrasse Tyson starts this texting or this tweeting chain this way. He says, late to the party here, but in this year's Top Gun movie, Tom Cruise's character Maverick ejects from a hypersonic plane at Mach 10.5. Before it crashed, he survived with no injuries. At that airspeed, his body would splatter like chainmail gloves swatting a worm. Just saying.
What a
he then
visual.
goes on to say, hold on, I got to read this one. He then follows it up with, when Maverick ejected, like he did like 3 or 4 tweets on this. So clearly the man had something was bothering him. This was a nit that he needed to address. And he writes, when Maverick ejected at Mach 10.5, he was going 7,000 miles per hour, giving him 400 million joules of kinetic energy, the explosive power of 100 kilograms of TNT, a situation that human physiology is not designed to survive. So no, Maverick does not walk away from this. He be dead, very dead.
Man, you got to admit, when that man has a nit, he picks the living snot out of it, don't he?
He dropped the people's elbow on it. Jeez Louise.
Here's the factotum, the theorem, and yes, I will show my work. Here you go.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, yeah. But it's not like he was completely unharmed. He was very thirsty. Do you remember that? He was very, very thirsty afterwards. So, there was.
But I will say, when we went to see the movie and they were doing that part in the beginning where he's flying at Mach 10.5 and all of a sudden, the plane explodes or whatever. And I'm just like, And then he walks in. I'm like, how on earth did he survive that? I mean, he was going, like, I didn't know all the facts that, like, Neil deGrasse Tyson is spewing here, but I knew he was going fast, and I knew it was probably a situation that most human beings wouldn't survive without some sort of vehicle, or structure around them. So, I did find that kind of interesting.
Well, now here's the thing. There are. And this is coming from a guy who used to geek out on military aircraft, so I actually, in some ways, I do know a little bit about some of this stuff. I'm not trying to say I'm any kind of authority. Please, please, please. I mean, the show is called Free Range Idiocy, and if you've heard me talk, you know I'm not an authority on anything at all. But there are aircraft that instead of an ejection seat, as you see in fighters and stuff like that, it's like a capsule, and so it's meant to sustain higher speeds and things like that. You would think for an aircraft traveling that fast that there would be some type of enhanced way to get the pilot out. Now, I mean, not always, because famously back in the day, ejection seats were kind of optional in test aircraft. In fact, Chuck Yeager, when he flew faster than the speed of sound, not only was there no ejection seat in his plane, the only way out was a door on the side of the aircraft where if he had jumped out, he would have been cut in half by the wings, which were right in back of the door. So there was literally, the only reason he had a parachute was basically it was a cushion for him to sit on. And there was no way of getting out. And then the follow-up plane for that, they actually just bolted him in. So it's like, you don't even have any way of getting out now. So good luck.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's unheard of for there not to be. However, at this point in this day and age, it's hard to believe that there wouldn't be some kind of escape mechanism for a pilot. That all being said, yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Like, but it also does a wonderful job of setting up the movie. Like, okay, if you buy this, then you're going to buy everything else now, because we're totally going beyond the bounds of what you would believe, and then we're just going to start ripping off Star Wars. And you know what? If you bought into this fact that Tom Cruise jumped out of a plane at 10.5 times the speed of sound and only got dehydrated instead of splattered with like a chainmail glove hitting a worm, which, oh my gosh, what an image. This guy needs to be writing. Well, it gets
even better, because he even breaks it down, like he even sent out a tweet where he was saying, like, at supersonic speeds, air cannot smoothly part. You must pierce it. So he says, for this reason, the air on your body, if ejecting at these speeds, might as well be a brick wall.
Yeah, because usually pilots don't eject
Neil
that
was
fast.
watching Top Gun 2 over the weekend. Clearly, this rubbed him the wrong way, and he had to layeth the smacketh down with some facts, ladies and gentlemen. And man, he put forth
this is also the guy,
thesis of epic proportions on this one.
This is also the guy who talked about the stars in Titanic being the wrong stars, the wrong constellations.
That's right, I forgot about that. Oh my gosh.
4 years. And then when they re-released it, he had talked to different people who knew James Cameron, and then when it got re-released, they were the right stars. So someone heard him, and I'm like, you know what? This actually is not surprising whatsoever. Not even a little bit.
Nope.
But it is interesting because, and I told you before when we were kind of texting back and forth, there was this weird fan theory that essentially Maverick dies in that accident, and the rest of the dream, the rest of the movie is his death dream, and it's like kind of him being able to have one last hurrah and make amends, and everything ends happy and all of that. So there is some credence to that now. It's like, hey, well, this might be it, because hey, science.
That's right. So
it's nice that we have. It's nice we have science like this back in movies now. We have like real scientists interested in these movies. Back in our day when we were growing up, the only science we got was like weird science, and it's like you put a bunch of photos into a scanner, and somehow you get Kelly LeBrock, which quite honestly, it wounded my belief in humanity for years, because I was like, it's all lies.
We had Star Wars and Star Trek as well, sir. So
I know, but that really doesn't balance out when you're a lonely teenager. I'm just saying. I know. Anywho.
Well, we thank Mr. deGrasse Tyson for setting the record straight on Maverick, and we will have to come up with some other content for Tom Cruise next time.
I look forward to Tom's response to that. I
almost feel like now I have to have a sub-segment of, like the Weekend Geek needs to have a Tom Cruise sub-segment of some kind now. We'll have to see.
Well, it should. I mean, we need to get them sweet Xenu downloads.
That's right. Well, so I have something prepared as a second point, but I want to ask you, sir, do you just want to jump down to number 3 since we're probably going to have a spirited debate and we can table the second point for another
if you
time?
want to, I'm all for it. I am all for it, sir.
Because I'd like us to do a trailer real-time, commentary as we watch it.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
Let me grab this here.
Get into what will most assuredly be the debate of 2022. Is Picard season 3 going to be worth the viewing or not? Uncle Todd is not keen on the show right now, but I want to see if I can win him over.
Okay. Well, I've just now pulled up the YouTube's link that you sent me, and this will be in the show notes if you would like to watch along with us. This actually dropped back on October 8th, so it's a couple days old. Mm-hmm. But then again, this weekend I've been kind of unplugged. I've tried to get away from social media and from my computer in general, so I was not aware of it until the man they call Tim sent this to me. You know what's really funny when you when you get this pulled up?
Yes, I have it up.
Okay, now I know. Look all the way to the left of the picture, and there's those two people talking.
Yes.
If you looked quick, you can almost think that that's Wong.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Like kind of dark robes. I'm like, oh my gosh, now we're getting a crossover here. Wong's everywhere.
Yes.
My good God.
Yes,
that would be
indeed.
great. That would actually, you know what? Then if that was the case, then I'm all in on this show. However, I'm pretty sure I know that's not Wong. Yeah, because he's not singing
Star
karaoke.
Trek and Marvel crossover. Look out.
That would actually be really cool.
Dun, dun, dun.
It'll never happen, but I mean, it'd be cool. All right, so we've got this queued up to all zeros. Do you want to watch this, sir?
I'm ready, sir.
All right, let's count it down. 3, 2, 1, play.
I'm playing.
And once again, Kirk
Picard
eating.
Sitting at the local pub.
Having himself a white wine spritzer.
Wine spritzer. I said brewski, but that's all right. Maybe a bourbon. I don't know.
No, it's definitely got to be a wine. Man owns a vineyard.
Dang. There's some messed up stuff going on in space right now.
Isn't there always? Oh, there's Raffi.
Raffi. Now, is that the Enterprise, I wonder?
I don't know.
It looks like it. Now, I got to say, this ship, this is impressive. Kind of reminds me of the ship from Nemesis, the Scimitar.
See, I don't remember that.
Let's slip the dogs of war. Of course you do, Worf, in your old age. I love that line. We're all going to die. Oh, my gosh. Must everything have galactic import?
Uh-huh.
That's what Raffi needs, a little smackdown from Worf.
Yeah.
So I believe that's LaForge's daughter, or which is actually LeVar Burton's daughter.
Really?
So
that's kind of cool.
Wait a minute, I thought he was a pacifist. Why is he... Oh, there goes the Federation building. What happened there?
Yeah, that happens like every other movie now.
Yeah, that's true. Now that looks like a modernized Enterprise there.
Well, no, that was the that ship from the end of season 1, remember? And there was like a 1,000 of them because they're just mass producing them now.
Yep. Haha, Moriarty. I love it. Hello, Mr. Bond. Oh, but we're not quite done yet.
Of course not.
It's not the final season quite yet. Oh. Data, you're old. Oh, wait a minute. That's not Data. Oh, they're bringing them all back. I love it. I love it.
So,
let the debate begin. Let's slip the dogs of war, my friend.
Okay, so for those of you who are wondering why Tim keeps repeating that, because he's not a Shakespearean expert, of course, that's Amanda Plummer playing the rando Romulan baddie here. And, of course, Christopher Plummer, her dad, played what's-his-face from Star Trek 6. I don't remember his name, but Admiral, Captain of something.
Either, but yeah, let me look it up. Keep going.
It probably sounds something like what my cat sounds like in the middle of the night when she's dealing with a particularly vile furball. So something along those lines. Okay, so
Chang. His name was, I think, General Chang.
Oh, okay. Well, then never mind. It was actually, much more normal than what I thought. Okay, here's the thing. Do you want to talk about it and say what is exciting to you about this, or do you just want me to start off on my little black-hearted rant on this? I'll let you choose.
Why don't you go first, and then I'll try to swoop in with some hope and joy.
Okay. So here's the thing. When I watched this, and I kind of gave my little thoughts on this to the man they called Tim earlier today. He was like, have faith. I'm like, why would I have faith after having just sat through season 2 of Picard? And this one was shot back to back with it. So I'm pretty sure it's not like there was a huge sea change and they reacted to people's, acceptance or non-acceptance of season 2. Like, it was bang, bang, and then we're done. So why would I have any faith that this is going to be much different than what happened to season 2? That's my concern. I enjoyed season 1 of Picard. And I don't want people to think like, oh, he just hates it. No, I watched all of Next Generation when it was in first run. I watched a ton of it in reruns, watched all the movies, blah, 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 blah. My Star Trek creds are there. My issue here is we are seeing the exact fatal flaw from season 2, and they're doing the same thing with season 3, which is why I'm not even cautiously optimistic. I will watch this, but I got to be honest, like, I might give this 1 or 2 episodes and then just peace out. I don't know if I can go through another 9 episodes of hate watching Picard. I don't know that I can do that to my soul. It just withers by the hour watching it. The fatal flaw here is too many damn bad guys. I can tell you already what's going to happen, okay? Here's what's going to happen. Here's my bet. Go ahead and write this down if you want. What's going to happen is one of them is going to start off kind of as like which probably is Moriarty. Moriarty is probably going to be much more of the Q character, okay? And then you've got, then all of a sudden, he's going to disappear for vast swaths of time and really not have a whole lot going on the entire time. Then you're going to have this other person, the rando Romulan, Romu Plummer, and she's gonna come in and she's gonna do all this stuff, but we don't know that much about her, and who knows how well the writing is gonna be, and whether or not they're actually gonna pay a lot, actually put in the character work for her, because they really didn't in the previous season. They really didn't put in the character work for any of the bad guys to really get you there. They were relying on the fact like, hey, it's Q. You know Q. You love Q. See, it's Q. Like, yeah, but why the frack should I care? Like, you forgot you got to give me that reason. Otherwise, doesn't really matter. So we're going to have Moriarty. Okay, fine. Then we have lore, because as someone posted on YouTube as a comment, find you someone who loves you the way that Star Trek loves Brent Spiner. And you know what? It's not like I hate on Brent Spiner. I love the man since he was in Night Court. Been a fan of him. But we don't need another Brent Spiner bad guy. I don't need that. Not even a little bit. Because they did such a crap job with him in the previous season. I don't need another Brent Spiner bad guy. Don't want it. I would be happy if they managed to somehow bring Data back more than I am seeing lore. Because, again, now it's like, okay, even more confusion about who the bad guy is. Awesome, because you're going to have 3 of them you're trying to juggle, and we've already seen that you suck at it. Because I can't imagine it's a whole new writing team and a whole new, like, maybe it is, but the previous team sucked at it and you hired those guys. I'm not sure that the new team is going to do much better at it. Or like we talked about with DC, maybe the writing team was really trying and the studio notes were like, nope, you'll do this and this and this. And they're like, alrighty then, it's your money. I'm just saying one way or another, there's not a whole lot to trust here. And I got to be quite honest, I am really getting sick of the entire universe is out to get Jean-Luc Picard. Like, more, it's what it's always about, attempts on your life. I know, and you know what? I'm friggin' sick of it. Give me something else. Good God. Like, it's like the most, it's almost like, it's like the most narcissistic view of like the universe ever, that is all everyone's out to get Jean-Luc Picard. Why? For God's sake, like, is he like the one point in time between all these things that you got to kill him and then the whole universe can blink out of existence? And that would be more interesting than whatever the crap this is coming up with, probably. But I'm so sick of this. Like, it's, and I want to see the band back together. I want to see the crew back together. I'm like, oh, we got Crusher, we got Worf, we got Geordi. This is gonna be awesome. Then I'm like, and guess what? It's gonna be the same crap as season 2. So yeah, I guess you could say I'm not exactly like over the moon about this.
May I rebut?
Go right ahead.
Or maybe not so much a rebuttal yet, but just more of my perspective, and then maybe there'll be a rebuttal in there. So
sure.
I do understand the unevenness of season 2 and why that would rattle your faith.
Okay.
But as a, much like you, as a longtime fan of Next Generation, the movies, the original cast of Star Trek movies as well, I have faith that they are going to do right. This is the send-off for an iconic character in Jean-Luc Picard. And I think season 2 became a victim of some of the hype and the weight of bringing back a character like Q and not really having a great idea of what to do with that character over the course of a season. The reason I have great faith in what they're going to do for season 3 really does come down to kind of the last half hour, or I don't know the exact timestamps, a la Jimmy Dice, but the entire interaction between Q and Picard at the very end of the final episode of season 2, both in his chateau and also as Q basically dies, sending them back to their time. I think they know how to do justice by these characters. I think they did not have a great premise during season 2 to get there. I think there was a lot that was being asked of the audience to suspend in terms of the time travel aspect, in terms of what exactly is Q's role in all of this. It was not clear. There probably could have been a better story told to basically draw a line of he enters back into Jean-Luc's life because he is about to die, and deep down he has always had an affinity for the man and as a human, and what he, kind of the spirit he carries within himself, that I think, we saw in that kind of final moment where Picard knows, that even though this is a supreme being, that his greatest fear was to be left alone and to die alone. And so I thought that was a very poetic end for that character. Going into season 3 now, and what they're showing here for this final journey, is what excites me is the fact that we don't know who this villain is, at least the initial one, Amanda Plummer. We don't know the background. We know it's not a Borg, which is great. I mean, that to me is already a great sign, because if it went to the Borg, then, I would share in Uncle Todd's Lewis Black-esque affinity for what this season could be. But there's promise there. There's promise in bringing Moriarty back. I am not convinced that Moriarty is coming back as one of the villains. I am wondering if Picard is when we see Moriarty is going to someone who, kind of knew how to play a game and almost defeat Picard in this sort of fake world of, the the name's escaping me. What was it? The
Holodeck?
Holodeck. Thank you. So I'm almost wondering if the Moriarty reference is more of a red herring than anything else in terms of being a villain. I think the lore tie-in is interesting in and of itself, in and of the fact that, the last time we saw lore, I thought he was being dismantled. So we don't quite understand what's going on with that. But it is poetic to note, that when the Next Generation movie franchise came to an end with Nemesis, it ended with the death of Data. And I'm guessing that for this final season, that Picard may end up being the one who, in the same way that Data gave his life to save his crew, that maybe we see Picard come to his end to bring the end of lore and kind of bring the entire Noonien Soong sort of circle to an end with that. So that's what I'm kind of thinking in my head about it. I think a lot of the other shots and a lot of the other things we see in the trailer, are certainly interesting. I'm really, looking forward to seeing the cast, the old cast kind of interact and what that's, all about. And just kind of understanding the story. I think we're just headed into kind of uncharted waters. And so I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be a serviceable end and a nice kind of, final chapter to a beloved group of people who started a series that I don't think anyone ever thought was going to amount to anything, and turned into probably one of the most, iconic and emotionally connected sort of casts and series in the Star Trek franchise. It really kind of kicked everything off. It's what led to Deep Space Nine. It's what led to Enterprise and a lot of the other franchises that spawned off of it. And so, I see some poeticness in what they're going to do. Now, to your point, your concerns are grounded in the data, which is they didn't execute a very strong season 2, and could they screw up season 3? Absolutely. But I have faith. That they're going to do right in this final season to send this character off appropriately and to do so in a way that I don't mean to say it's fan service, but I think services, in the same way that Q's end, I think really like when you look at the comments on YouTube for that final scene with Q, I think a lot of fans really enjoyed it because it was everything they thought Q was supposed to be as a character. I think we always kind of knew that character had an affinity for Picard, even though he always seemed like he was the antagonist. And he was just one of those, and we know people like that in our lives, people that, they challenge us and they sharpen us through the challenging that they do. And I think it was kind of the big payoff to see that deep down, this character was probably one of Picard's biggest fans. And I think that's what we as fans were kind of hoping to see at one point. So I really think they're going to do right by him. And I think the introduction of, these 3 different villains may not materialize the way you're thinking that it might. That is my hope. That is my belief, but I can always be wrong and proven wrong. So that is where I kind of come in on this.
Okay. May I retort?
Please.
Okay. Well, first of all, that's a seltzer that I wish I was a beer. I wish was a beer right now, because I've realized I'm doing a show with an absolutely delusional human being. Okay. So you've obviously been brainwashed in some way here by some sort of Roddenberry-esque cult. So allow me to try and deprogram a little bit. I cannot, I understand where you're coming from. I just don't understand where you're getting that hope and optimism from what we saw in season 2. You mentioned the last 30 or so minutes of the season finale. Mm-hmm. Granted, that was good. The problem being the 8 episodes and a half before that did nothing to earn that moment. Q was such a tangential part of that story. Like, he was the bookend, which, hey, that, you know what, that's fine. But not really when you're dealing with a character like Q. Like, that's fine if you're, you know, I mean, for other characters, perhaps. For someone that is just a meh sort of thing, or, you know, middling sort of baddie or whatever, to use as a framing device, okay, fine. But for Q, that's what you're going to do? No, you didn't earn any of that. Like, you're relying almost totally on the nostalgia and people bringing that emotion from the character and what was done in the Next Generation series.
Sure. Which
is fine. You're going to do that. You're going to pull those strings anyways. But it relied almost solely on that. They added almost nothing to that character's story in that 9 episodes. And he disappeared for vast periods of time.
I agree.
So to me, that's why I look at it and go, well, they're going to do right by the character. Well, yeah, they tried to cinch it up at the end, but you had to sit through 8.5 episodes of like, really? What the hell's this? You know, like, and just, that's the thing. Like, I have, and again, like, we're not talking about like something that now is like, oh, well, they've had time they're going to fix it all. Like, these were shot back to back. So they thought they had, like, they didn't, it wasn't like, oh, well, we got to get this out the door. Oops. They thought they had that.
Yeah.
Like, this is not some Joe Schmo operation like a YouTube series or something. Like, this is money being put into this. This is a lot of money and corporate decisions being made here. They thought they had a winner. They thought they had the winning horse. They had the golden ticket. And they were really holding a spray-painted turd. And this was like conceived and written kind of all together. Like, these were produced back to back. So therefore all of these scripts were like done at some point, at least in that period. And I'm imagining they probably had this stuff done in order to get you to that point and be ready to shoot right after they finished that. I mean, I don't know how the production worked exactly, but I'm guessing these were written and all kind of conceived at a fairly the same time. So why would this be any different in how they handled it, and why would there be any fewer holes in this? That's what I can't understand, where you get that optimism from, because I see no evidence for it.
I think, I mean, I don't know. I'm speculating when I say this. So first off, you make some fair points. You're pointing to the evidence and data of season 2, which was what you just said, that there was a lot of inconsistency. It was uneven. Looking back on season 2, I feel like they tried to take or they cherry picked plot devices such as time travel, such as, fish out of the water in a different time. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine I'll say it this way. I think their goal was to try to hit some of the same goals and notes that, 1986's, The Voyage Home hit, which was, wouldn't it be cute to see these serious Star Trek figures in a completely different time, out of their element, and so forth. And
it was a total ripoff. Like, almost in some ways, like
some of it was done as a
updating.
homage, like the whole thing on the bus where they see the guy with the boom box and he politely turns it off instead of being a total schmuck.
But so much of it was like it went beyond an homage, and it was done so poorly that to me it's like, nah. This is just like copying. Like, you're literally copying off the kid next to you during the test. That's what it felt like.
Well, yeah. So I understand what you're saying about the timing of it, where they filmed it, filmed them together, or back to back and within close proximity of one another, that the same quality might exist. You know, I can't sit here and say you're wrong. I mean, you could be right. But I just feel like when you take things like time travel out of the story, when you take things like the Borg out of the story, and you start to plug in, I think, a different villain, and I think, you know, some undertones of past villains. And like I said, I could be wrong in this, but I really feel like if this is the final season, and it's not that they have to kill Picard off, but I feel like there is a poetry to Picard sacrificing himself for his friends to take down the, you know, the Jekyll or the darker half of what was his closest, you know, friend or being that he felt very close to, which was Data. And you know, and if you took Data, you know, Data was Anakin, and Lore is in some ways, you know, like the Vader side of him. He isn't Vader in the sense that he's a, you know, intimidating villain that was, you know, iconic and defining for Star Trek, but he was a villain nonetheless that, you know, was perpetrating and trying to, you know, cause a great deal of harm to humanity. And so I just see the poetry there, and I think they will do service to it. I think they got bogged down in trying to do too much homage, too much time, you know, too much with time travel, too much with the Borg, all in service of a story around Q's, you know, finality. They could have done a better job. So could they screw this up? 100%. But like I said, I you know, my when I say faith is what you cannot see or touch. So I am not basing this on Data. I am basing this on the hope that the people who are working through this are going to do the characters and do the story justice. And yeah, there is a bit of fan service to it because you want to pay off on these characters. And maybe when you take some of those variables out, then you can have a good story. Could the variables of Moriarty, Lore, and this unknown villain, you know, completely muck things up? There's always that opportunity. So I just feel like, you know, anyone can have a bad run, and there's always the opportunity to correct it. And I think with the TNG cast, I think they're going to do that. So that is where I stand on this, sir.
All right. Well,
your points are well taken. I cannot say you're wrong because I understand where you're coming from. I felt the things you were talking about. So, but I just had a more forgiving sense of it when I got to the end of it and felt like, okay, I can let go of everything I had an issue with because this payoff with him and Q was I just really enjoyed it. It was very emotionally satisfying for me as a fan. And I felt, okay, it was a rough season, but this was really cool to kind of get this moment.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're right on season 3. Because I
hope for your sake I'm right on season 3, because I think you're going to blow a casket, a gasket if you know.
No,
end up in a casket.
I will literally stop watching after 2 episodes. I think that is what I'm setting myself for, because had I stopped with season 2, I probably would have been a much better person. As it is, I've probably taken years off of my life watching that pony loaf of a season of Star Trek.
You know what the real measure is going to be? Is
what?
Is the Raffi annoyance factor, the RAF baby? Because Raffi wasn't bad in season 1. Actually, I like the character. I felt. I don't know who wrote Raffi for season 2, but that was not the Raffi we saw in season 1.
Yeah,
and
that was a big problem. It felt like going from season 1. It felt like they almost tried to pull like a Transformers or the movie thing where they were like, hey, we're going to kill off. Or they didn't kill off characters, but they're like, hey, we're going to introduce a whole bunch of new characters, so you're going to be excited, and yay! And then they got to the end, they're like, oh, so you don't like some of these characters. Okay. Then they got to season 2, and those writers didn't know what to do with them, so they either killed them off or just kind of put them to the side
Yeah.
And that's what happened with half the characters. Like, well, I don't know what to do with this character. All right, well, just don't mention him in this episode.
Yep.
That's a main character, you know? And that's why I just felt so lazy and ratcheting up some. Yeah, like Raffi was totally annoying and was not. I felt like they kind of shortchanged the trauma and the stuff that she was dealing with and played it very flat. And that kind of ticked me off because it's like, that's not the world we live in now. That was like a very 1980s, 1990s sort of way of writing stuff, and just people just got over stuff. And that's not the way stuff is written now, because we kind of know, like, that's just not how stuff works. Like, even if you do, like, people just, oh, I just got over it. Well, no, you're probably going to be dealing with that. And the people around you are going to be dealing with it for years to come. Congratulations. And it felt like it was just kind of a lazy way of doing it. Now, the one thing I will say is I wonder, because another thing that bugged me about season 2, it felt so cheap. So cheap. I don't know why, but I was like, did they get their budget drop precipitously for this season? Because it just felt like everything was a very cheap set. And part of the reason for the time travel was like, all right, well, we got to save budget, so we can't do a lot of stuff in space. We don't want to build a lot of sets. So stuff that we have on a back lot, or just buildings that we can get cheap. And that way, hey, we don't have to use a lot of special effects because it's happening now-ish. So we can just kind of throw some trash on a street and do this, and we'll dress it and it'll be fine. And it kind of what's going now will work, so we don't have to spend a ton of extra money. I wonder if they're shooting these both back to back, they did that because they knew that they needed the big budget for season 3. I wonder if it was one big pot that they were playing out of, and they're like, okay, well, we can only spend, we know the story we want to tell for season 3 is this, and we got to figure out some way to do a story in season 2 that only spends 30% of our budget, because 70% of it is going to be for season 3. Yep. I just wonder about that. That's the only way that I could then go back and go, okay, well, fine, I guess, but even then, it's like, you could have done a time travel story, and it could have been a lot better. You just didn't do it. Yep. But I hope you're right on season 3. I do, because I do like Star Trek. I've loved Star Trek, and that's part of the reason why I've
trying to infuse some hope into you, sir.
Well, I've been more prickly about season 2, and of course season 3 now coming up, because I took it as a personal affront.
All right. Well, thank you, sir, for your points. It was a good debate. I feel good now. I have a sip of bourbon. And that, my friends, is The Week in Geek.
Well, thank you for scouring the interwebs and finding something that would raise my blood pressure by at least 30%. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And now on to the main subject for this episode. We are going to talk about For All Mankind. Now, if you have not watched this show, I'm going to tell you right now, the rest of the show is going to be spoilerific. Okay,
so very much so.
Listen at your own risk. However, and you're not going to hear me say this very often. If you haven't watched this show, please don't listen to the rest of this. Go watch the show, because you want all of the surprises. You want all of the twists. You want all of the reveals. You want all of it. If Battlestar Galactica was even vaguely up your particular alley, I think you're going to like this, because again, it is character driven with a setting in, alternate history. The same way that Battlestar Galactica, it was a character driven drama that happened to be set in space.
And after watching it, come back and listen to this. Listen to the wisdom coming from the mouths of Uncle Todd and myself.
By all means. Actually, you know what? Put on a pot of coffee, pause this, and just start binge watching. Call into work for the rest of the week and just watch, because you'll love it.
Why aren't you coming in? I listened to these two chuckleheads, and they told me not to.
Yeah, you might not want to throw that out there, because, that's a sure-firing right there. That's a paddling. Yep, that is. So, just a warning, so you can't say I didn't want to know, but we are gonna be spoilerific, because there's not really a way that you can talk about this show without getting into some of that. Like there's a lot of stuff that happens here, folks. And what's really going to be interesting is the fact that as much as I enjoyed this show, Tim is much fresher to the scene here because he has just binged all 3 seasons in the last couple months here, whereas it's been about a year and a half or about a year.
Be that long? Didn't you just watch season 3?
Well, no, it's been like a year and a half of me watching the show because I started watching it after season 1 was almost done, or I think it had just finished up. Then there was the break for season 2, and then I just finished up season 3 not that long ago. So, I mean, season 3 is kind of fresh in my head. Well, as fresh as anything can be in my head. Season 1 and 2 are kind of in my far rear view mirror, and I did not have a chance, because I've been moving and painting. To you know what? I should have had Tim pay for my painters, and that would have alleviated this whole problem.
All right, taking care of it, man.
Dang it! Well, maybe he'll just send me some deviled eggs. So I'm going to rely. Probably not. Yeah. Ooh, yeah.
Smelly.
Anyways, so the man they call Tim is really going to be the one who's going to kind of walk us through this because he's going to have a bit more insight for those earlier seasons. I'll try and chime in when like those 3 brain cells in my skull like manage to like somehow collide and produce a thought. I'll chime in, but for the most part, sir, you have the con.
All right. Well, I'm going to fly this thing right into an asteroid. No, I'm kidding. All right. So let's set the premise and let's at a high level just real quick cover kind of what we like about the series. And then we're going to get into season 1, season 2, season 3, the good, the bad, and the ugly of each. Premise of this show is that it is based in an alternate history where America is not the first to land on the moon. Instead, it is the Russians. And that is really what starts all of this off. And I remember reading on Wikipedia, the source of all truth, that Ronald D. Moore was quoted as saying, he explained that apparently there was a gentleman named Sergei Korolev who was the father of the Soviet space program.
Sergei?
Sorry?
Sergei, not Sergei.
Oh, sorry, Sergei. And so in our history, our reality, he died during an operation in Moscow in the mid-'60s. And after that point, their moon program, never really took off. And so that is where he says our point of divergence is because that in their reality, Korolev lives. Now, he's not a character in the show near as I can tell, especially in season 1, which, starts in the 70s or 1969, through I think like 74 or 75. And so basically, that is where this is all based in. Like the Russian program remains strong, neck and neck with the American program, and they end up landing on the moon first. And what transpires across the series is a what if the world's 2 biggest superpowers put forth innovation and resources and full, support behind these programs to continue to go further and further into space, with the moon and beyond that. And so that's where we find ourselves as we enter into this. So just to start off, at a high level across the seasons, what are some things that Ronald D. Moore and company have done correctly that you really enjoy? And then we'll get into specifics about each of the seasons.
I really enjoy how everything is very logical. Like you can, I just recently rewatched the movie Pacific Rim, which I'm not sure. I can't remember. Have we talked about that movie on here before? Have you seen that one?
Wait a minute, Pacific Rim, isn't that the one with like the huge robots?
Yeah, the kaiju and the Jaegers. So I trust me, I'll loop this around.
Okay.
Trust me. So
I'm curious where Uncle Todd's going on this one, folks. Holy crap.
I was watching it and I started listening to the commentary track with Guillermo del Toro, and he was talking about how the movie is basically a love letter to monster movies and mecha which were very big parts of his youth growing up, and that when they were building the Jaegers, when they were coming up with the idea and they were doing the effects and doing the design, he wanted everything to make sense. He wanted there to be a logic to the engineering. He wanted there to be detail. He wanted it to so that you could see like, oh, this does this and this does this, and it makes sense, and that gave it a certain amount of weight on the screen. That there was this loving care, and you could follow the logic of the engineering that went into these gigantic robots, so that when you see them on the screen, like they're moving in ways that you're like, oh. And the same with the monsters, like they were making these monsters move in different ways, and again, it added this sort of weight. They actually you could believe that they were taking up space in that scene. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. What I like about how Moore and company handled this is it's not just, okay, this one thing happened, now everything just goes crazy. Or like this one thing happens and, the world is kind of the same as it turns out now, but these things have changed. Like, no, everything changed. Like, it's a butterfly effect, and you can see the logic of those changes. You can see the engineering that went into it. You can see that, oh, the order of presidents, the people who get elected presidents are different. The way that the politics of the country changed, this and that and the other, and different things are happening. Now, some things are kind of happening in the same way or slightly different, or it's a parallel track, but you can, throughout the thing, you can be like, oh, I can totally understand how those changes would influence things in this direction. And it's not just self-contained to NASA. It covers everything. Like there's little mentions of things that you don't need to go deep into the weeds on it, but you're like, oh, and this is affecting world events, and everything is changed by this one kind of turn, which of course goes back to like what you were saying, the guy who was really the driving force behind that moon program now being alive. Like, oh, now there's a chance that the Russians could actually get to the moon first. I really enjoyed that because for someone like me who obviously, as you can tell with my thoughts on Picard season 2, I enjoy getting into those details, and I appreciate that craft in the writing of throwing in enough information, like not inundating me with it, but appreciating the fact that I've probably got somewhat of a brain and I can figure stuff out if you just kind of give me tidbits here and I can put the pieces together, and then spend your time really working on the characters and the story you're trying to tell. And the rest is just kind of like shading and window dressing, and it's like, oh, okay, I got enough of that. I get it. I really appreciate how all of that, even if it goes a little bit overboard, I'm like, you know what? It's overboard, but you know what? I can trace that back, and I can see how you got there. So I appreciate that, and I think that's, and also just the focus on the characters, which is the reason why I kind of say it's the BSG sequel we deserve. Like, BSG was all about the characters, and you cared about them to the point of, like I've said before, Dee's suicide in season 4 messed me up in real life for days. And that's a character on screen, but completely just blew my mind and was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. Because that character had just kind of become part of my life in this weird sort of way in that show. And again, does that with this collection of characters and another very big cast. And not to take another quick swipe at Picard, but I'm going to anyways, because damn it, it's fun. They managed to do the thing that Picard didn't do. They managed to gracefully balance a large cast, and if someone isn't there all the time in your face...
Oops, you there?
All right, now thanks to an interwebs hiccup, we will proceed back on with what we were talking about, which I'm not exactly sure where I was, but I think it was somewhere along the lines of saying that unlike Picard, they managed to bring characters in and out of the story gracefully and in a much more logical sense, and kind of give them interesting things to do when they were there, so that when they're not there, it would... I don't know how to say this, but when you have characters do kind of interesting things when they're there, when they're not there, and then you have the other characters doing interesting things, you don't notice as much like, oh, where'd that person go?
Yeah.
Because at least when they show up, they're doing interesting stuff, which was always a thing with Picard. I didn't feel like they had Q doing anything really interesting when he'd show up. So then when he's gone, I'm just thinking like, they're totally wasting this guy. But I think that they did a really good job just balancing this cast and fulfilling the logic of the situation. And how about you, sir? What were your kind of overarching thoughts?
So, I mean, similar to yours, and one thing I want to touch on real quick that you said I think is really at the heart of, and we talked about this last episode a little bit with like Iron Man and like with Christian Bale's Batman, is the logic. You know, like when you said that perfectly, I think summarized why I think Iron Man resonated the way that it did with the audience when they went to see it, is because you could, and I think we use the term sometimes grounding, you know, as well to go with that, where, like you said, there was a logic to the mechs that were in Pacific Rim, you know, like you could understand it, you could connect with it. It didn't feel like something that was so far off, you know, the realm of reality, even though it is, you know, and even though there's definitely elements of Iron Man that were well off, you know, in terms of reality, but you could connect with it. And so I agree with that point. I think both in terms of the progression of both the American and Russian space programs, I think, you know, you alluded to the historical forking that happens, if you will, that I think was a brilliant, and it's really a catch it or you'll miss it sort of thing, because it isn't something that's really hammered on across episodes. It's really touched on very briefly, usually in the first episode of every season, and it's almost like it's become a thing where I have to like actually sit up and like be really paying close attention to catch detail. I can rewind it and probably go through in slow-mo and kind of figure out all the, you know, different details that they go into, but it's more kind of the big swipes, you know, the big things, like the thing I love out of season one. Well, actually, I'll save that for season one, but
yeah, save some. Keep something in the back.
But the fact that they go to that level of detail, and the fact that certain actions based on what we see the characters doing actually influences events that are really outside the realm of the story being told, I thought was really well done and very intelligent, and a great way to almost build not legitimacy, but just build that grounding and that connection that as an audience member I have with the story. So I think they've done a great job there. Love the investment made in all the characters, and the fact that, and we'll get into this when we talk about the seasons, but there are some things that drove me up the wall with some characters, not because the characters themselves were being done a disservice through the writing, but because that was the point of how they were written. You know what I mean? Like, and real quick, I'll just say season one, Karen. Okay. Season one, Karen, a wife of an astronaut. I cannot tell you how frustrated I was with her character, and I'll get into the details of what I was frustrated with, but there were things about her character that were driving me insane, but she was written that way for a reason. And you see the evolution of her character across the 3 seasons, which I think is a really... I don't want to say really interesting thing that they do, but a positive, because that reflects humanity. I mean, we all evolve. Who I was as a 20-year-old is not who I am as a 47-year-old man now. You know what I mean? And so showing that growth and that evolution of her, covering, you know, going into topics like, like, you know, women's, you know, role in the space program, or women's impact in the space program, race in the space program, the way they deal with different situations, you know, the way that the writers and producers and directors get you so invested in some characters, even as someone as you know, simple as a season 1 character, like, let me just look his name up real quick. Werner von Braun, who was the rocket engineer, and how invested you are in his plight as he goes through some things in season 1. They just do, like you said, they just do such a great job and such a service to all the characters, so you really do care about them, and you don't even realize you care about them until you start to see the plot unfolding in a particular direction for certain characters. And so no, I think overall, I think they do a phenomenal job, telling 2 or 3, kind of like storylines in a given episode, and keeping it interesting, balancing it, and making it relevant to the kind of longer term and more general direction that the overall narrative is going in. So, and none of the leaps that they make in terms of the space aspect of it are completely not fathomable. I mean, like you actually can see some of these things materializing and being what they are, had there been the attention given and resources allocated. And and so I think it's made it very kind of connected. It's something you can engage in and feel connected with, without making it feel like really far off. I think about, was the Katie Sackhoff show we watched, was it called Another World?
Another Life.
Another Life. One of the things that I think really set these two shows apart is the fact that in Another Life, they really spent a lot of time, and I understand why they did it, because I've often thought about this in terms of just a science fiction story of, what do characters go through when they're traveling through space? Like what's happening in those moments when they're in between Earth and Mars or something like that. This show doesn't deal with that. They're very economical in how they do their storytelling. They focus their time and energy on things that really matter, and they kind of set aside some of the lesser important, even though it's interesting to think about. Having watched a show like Another Life, I'm like, I really don't need to see what's going on in between the trip from Earth to Mars or Earth to wherever they were going. I'd rather just get into the things of where they end up, and maybe a little bit of the in between is reasonable, but not an entire season almost that's about I'm going from point A to point B and everything that happens in between. So I think they've been very economical in their storytelling, which has made it very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, and it's a difference in show, and I'm not saying that it's difference in show because one is, I think one obviously has a bit more of a budget than the other.
Sure.
Which was one of the tough parts, about Another Life, is that you're like, okay, this is obviously not as big budgeted as some other shows, but the difference really being that Another Life is a sci-fi show, kind of in the same vein as like Star Trek: The Next Generation was a sci-fi show. It's about the voyage. It's about the stuff that happens on the ship. Whereas For All Mankind it's a character drama that happens to be set in a sci-fi / alternate timeline setting. They're focused on different things. And when you're making decisions like character first, then you're going to say, okay, well, I need X, Y, and Z to show these characters to do this. So then you're going to say, yeah, well, I don't need to see what happens in the capsule, between here and there. I don't need to see what happens here and there, the more sci-fi-y, things. Is there anything happening? No? Okay, well, if I'm not going to get any character moments and it's not furthering the story, then I don't need to see it. You know what I mean? And they've done a great job. They did a great job in all those seasons establishing a couple different places that they could hop in between and making them interesting. That's the key, like making it actually interesting of why you're going to go there. And it just goes to show that it is really hard to do a show like this where you're hopping around with a somewhat bigger actually this is a fairly big cast. You have a lot. That's why, to me, like this resonates very much in a BSG sort of way. Like you have a lot of main characters. You can make a case of like, oh well, here's the lead, but not really. I mean, there's a good 6 people in any given season who are really the leads, and then you have a bunch of other supporting characters who are like not even necessarily second tier, like they're like kind of 1A, like they're still very important, and then below that you have even more characters. So it's difficult to do that and to juggle all of that and to make sure that you're not just losing track of people and going, oh yeah, well, you know what, let's just kill this person off, because we don't know what to do with them, or we're going to put them in a coma or whatever,
right.
Or like they did with I don't even remember the dude's name in Picard, Picard's little Romulan protege there. The one that Rafi was all worked up about.
That's right. Vulcan. I think he was a Vulcan.
Vulcan? I thought he was Romulan. Maybe. I mean, either way, whatever his name was, it didn't matter.
I don't remember his name, but I remember him, and I get what you're saying. Yeah.
They did him dirty, like in a triple threat match. Well, kind of. It's like they did like with like in a triple threat match where they just like wound him. Well, no, they killed him, but then of course he comes back. But like you just take him out because, well, we can't figure out how to tell a story with this many, so we got to drop him, And they don't really do that. Like the characters, if you have a character death, or you have a character leave, or something like that, it means something. Like they managed to actually make those things mean something. That's not the usual way it works. Like there's a lot of bad shows out there.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate it when you get something like this where you're like, wow, you're really good at this. Like really good. But yes, I agree with your points. That would have been much quicker for me to say.
All right. Well, now that we've talked about the show writ large, do you want to get into season 1?
Oh, sure, sir. What are your good or bad and uglies, whichever one you'd like to go with first?
And I like this across all the seasons, as I mentioned, but I'll hone in specifically on season 1 because there was a really interesting play on history that they did here. When the Russians, in episode 1, when the Russians land on the moon, there is a very specific call out to Ted Kennedy.
Yes.
Having to leave where he was in Chappaquiddick to come back to the White House in some sort of way of salvaging, I think the way they kind of frame it is he has to come back to D.C. to kind of salvage the space program of what his brother had started, John F. Kennedy. And by virtue of doing that, the tragedy of Chappaquiddick then doesn't happen. He doesn't end up in an accident where the mistress that he's with is killed. And so this opens the door. At the time, Richard Nixon is the president. He does not fall into disgrace with, the scandals that he had to deal with. Instead, he ends up pushing NASA, and trying, and throughout the season is really kind of a driver of a lot of things. In fact, one of the episodes is, I think episode 3 is called Nixon's Women, where he's looking to go tit for tat with the Russians, where the Russians put a woman on the moon. Now they want to put a woman on the moon as well. He's kind of driving stuff, but the fact that they kind of work things like that in where, which ends up with Ted Kennedy becoming president from, I believe, 72 to 76. And then Reagan ends up becoming president from 76 through 84. And so you have this complete shift from, in history from what we're used to seeing, that, where Nixon resigns and we have Gerald Ford and then we have Jimmy Carter and so on. And so, but because it's all hinged on this one event, driving the politics of the day and some of the politicians of the day to do different things from what our history, what we're familiar with. So I thought that was really cool. I like the establishment of all the main characters, Ed Baldwin, Gordo, his wife Tracy, Ed's wife Karen, Margot. We talked about, what's his name again? The rocket engineer.
Werner von Braun.
Werner von Braun is just a great character. Who with a very dark past and just kind of playing with that and kind of the foreshadowing, we don't know it at the time, but the foreshadowing in a way of how that plays out with his protege, Margot, and what she ends up doing across the 3 seasons. Not that it's to the level of what he did in terms of being part of Nazi Germany, but there's an element, I'm curious your thoughts on this, but there's an element as we get it down into season 3 of the way she kind of helps the Russians a little bit. and how that plays into things. And now, when things were very black and white for her with Werner and his involvement, now things, of course, are more gray for what she's trying to do, because it's all for the good. So I really liked it. I liked how they worked. Like I said, the impact of women in space and how seeing Russians putting a woman on the moon accelerates the Americans' desire to do it. I thought it was very telling in episode 1 that after the Russians land on the moon, they have this meeting of all the astronauts, and Deke is kind of like, go, just take the day off, be pissed off about it. But, when you come back on Monday, we're back to work, and all the astronauts just take off in these sports cars. And as I'm watching, I'm like, what a great kind of thematic thing to kind of show, okay, you guys just lost one of the biggest space races, and there you go off in your cars doing what, Americans do, right? Go do the fun, relaxing sort of stuff. So it kind of to me set the tone of, in this history or timeline, the Americans are a little more laid back and more fun, into the fun and that sort of thing. And it just kind of set them up as just not being as tuned into the overall goal, where I think in our history, I think NASA was just in a bit more of a focused place than where the Russians were. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting theme to play with. But then I like how they did. Oh, sorry.
I would actually disagree one thing there, because after reading, Tom Wolfe's book, The Right Stuff, you kind of get a little bit more background on just I think the reason we see NASA as a bit more, stringent and into all of this and organized, and is because NASA was triumphant in that space race, whereas before, really, like, we had a really big problem with rockets blowing up. Like, we could not, as the United States, we could not get rockets to not blow up. There was a lot of doubt about getting things to work, properly. And of course, with Russia being as secretive as it was, not really knowing where they were at. And, of course, they were the first ones to launch a satellite. They launched Sputnik first. So, I mean, Russia really was on that track, and we were having a lot of troubles. And there was a lot of, you were dealing with the idea of the pilots, wanting control, the engineers wanting it to be more like the pilots there for show and, very much a passenger sort of thing. So there was a lot of tension there, and there was a lot. So, I mean, I would just kind of temper that view maybe a little bit with we're looking at that back through the lens of our history. To me, I think it would be a different perception along this timeline. I think that was one of the cool things they did in the taking off and the branching off of this timeline.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And then what else? Loved what they did with the Jamestown, settlement that they do on what is it called? Shackleton Crater.
Yeah.
With Gordo, Ed, and what's her name? I'm forgetting her name now. Shoot.
Ellen. No, no, it's not. It wasn't Danielle. Ellen. It was, Danny. Yeah.
Danny. But just, showing some of the, through Gordo, showing some of the psychological effects of being up there and what it kind of does to them, and just, understanding just the toll that it takes, to the point of where it goes to the season finale where, they kind of do this really, kind of ad hoc sort of approach to getting Deke and what's her name, Ellen, to be the crew that replaces them and that sort of thing. And so, overall, I think all those things are really well done. I think what also is well done is showing kind of the role of some of the astronaut wives, and that plays into a lot of the stuff we see with Ed and Karen's son, Shane, which ends up being a major plot point, kind of toward the end of season 1 with his death and the impact of that. Karen and Ed come off as just probably the world's worst parents in the world, but
they're not winning any awards for sure.
No, but the thing that I was alluding to with Karen, that, and it isn't a bad thing, because like I said, I think it's effective storytelling, is just, as much as I was annoyed with her character, that was kind of the point, because she is like this pressure cooker that is just ready to blow. And, she's containing her emotions about her husband being on the moon for as long as he is. She's containing her emotions about her son acting out when he really isn't. The parenting was just really, I mean, that's kind of a nit of mine, is just, it seems almost too extreme, but maybe it was done that way to make a point about them. But I do appreciate the fact that they were trying to show like what these wives were having to go through, with their husbands being, going up into space and doing these things, and how that manifested itself. And then contrasting that with the women who are actually astronauts, who are doing, going into the program and dealing with the risks and that sort of thing. And just the different attitude and perspective they had, I thought was really cool. So just overall, I think they did a really great, service to, to the program overall, and just, taking it in a direction that is fictional, but is, like I said, grounded in something you can connect with, and thought it was, thought it was a really great way to kind of then, tag it into the where the second season was going to go in the 1980s.
Yeah, definitely.
How about you, sir? What is the good that you, or I don't know, disagree with any of the points, or? No,
I agree. I think the good for me is, especially with this season being kind of the major setup for the entire premise. I mean, there was a lot of heavy lifting that went on in the first few episodes here to really set the scene and be like, oh, whoa, this ain't your history faux show. Again, I just done very logically. I like how, quite honestly, I like how there was probably a lot of people who were all pissed off about how, and I'm going to use my air quotes because the sarcasm is going to be so thick on this one, how woke the show was. Much as how people are talking about how Star Trek is woke, like really, this is the time when women's liberation is happening, civil rights are happening. So yeah, these were issues then. This was not like, we're not retrofitting here. This was happening in the world at that time. It might not have been happening specifically at NASA, but through these machinations of an altered timeline, like, totally makes sense how this would start, an influx of these issues into this, very kind of rigid, like, hey, it's the boys' club, and then it isn't, right. And I think I really appreciate how they brought that in, and how it's not done just for giggles. Like, it becomes like a legit part of the show. Like, okay, and this is just now the way the world goes. It's not really harped on. It's not really, it then those things naturally progress, and I really appreciate that. And I thought it was done very well, and the setup was done really well. I do like the fact that, again, from reading the right stuff, like, you kind of get like NASA was a little bit on the reckless, not necessarily reckless. I would say NASA was definitely taking chances, because of course a lot of this stuff was being done for the first time. So I mean, when you're doing it for the first time, there's always going to be, you're making educated guesses in some areas, and you're trying to do it as safely as possible, but you have schedules, you have bosses and all that. I like how the pressure that is caused by the Russians beating us to the moon takes NASA into a much more reckless position, and how it becomes much more of like, okay, well, we got to do something. And it really starts this snowball of like, now the U.S. is the underdog in this situation. And I really appreciated how that just wasn't played off in one episode. Like, it continued throughout that season of, taking chances and really playing that up. Again, in the same way that BSG, didn't ignore things that happened previously. The Galactica never got magically fixed. They didn't, oh, hey, we found an old Cylon dock and we're going to gussy the old gal up. No, like, from the first season all the way to the end, like, every single pockmark from every single bomb and bullet that had hit that ship was still there. The characters had scars physically and emotionally. And in that same way, these characters and what's happening, it carries through. Like, these things don't go away. It doesn't get played for one episode and then, oh, well, that's not an issue anymore. Like, no, these characters, what happens to them carries through season after season after season. And I really appreciate that, again, because not everyone does that. You know?
Yeah.
It's nice to see it when it's done right.
Right.
I really enjoy the cast. I really enjoy the cast. I think they've done a great job. Just in some of these, you know, I think it's funny playing the game of like going and looking at the IMDb, like the not the glamour shot, but like the professional 8x10 or whatever that you would have for the actor. I'm sure from their agent or something being sent on an audition, and you see that photo, and then you're like, oh wow, totally different. Like, oh my gosh, this person is playing like this whole. I mean, and actors do that. Well, some actors do. Then there's some actors who basically they're just playing themselves. They don't really change that much. I really appreciate how this cast, like the way that they age the characters, or how these characters are kind of playing against type. Or I just really appreciate the cast doesn't have a huge amount of star power, but much like BSG, is very evenly talented in a way that they work really well together and play off each other, and the sum becomes greater than the parts. You know what I mean? I really appreciate that. Of course, you have what's his name here, Joel Kinnaman, who kind of is I guess you could say, like the lead for the show, or one of the like half dozen leads of the show. He of Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad, the RoboCop remake, a few other things that I've caught. Which actually, I rewatched that RoboCop remake. Not nearly as horrible as I remembered it the first time. However, just nothing I would really want to own. I'm glad it was for free on some streaming service. Anyways, but yeah, and Ren Schmidt, Chris Marshall playing Danny. Sarah Jones is Tracy Stevens, and I know you're not a huge fan of Karen Baldwin's parenting. However, Chantal Van Santen does a terrific job. I actually really appreciate how that character is almost like Ed is a lot lost without her, and in a way is also somewhat scared of her. Yep. I do like how that came across a couple times in that show. Like, Ed's like this, the big tough test pilot and this and that and the other, and then like is totally scared of his wife. And when she like crosses that line, he's like, "Oh boy, I done messed up now." Because now the top is coming off the pressure cooker and we're all going to die. Oh, I love that moment because I think that is such a realistic thing. And I remember, I go back to things like I was talking to my wife about this, when we worked in a warehouse, and our manager for the warehouse was a very nice lady, but probably weighed like 115 pounds, soaking wet. Not physically imposing at all, but we lived in sheer terror of this woman. Like, there was just something very authoritative about it, and we just didn't want to disappoint her and all that. So it's to me, it's very realistic, because everybody kind of has those people in their life that you might think you're really something, but then this person, another one that happens, like every car dealership. You've got you've got like the manager and all the salespeople who think they're all hot stuff, but there's like one person working in the office who runs the entire thing, and everybody is terrified of them because they could make their life a living hell. So they like that person comes walking across the showroom, and everyone scatters like roaches when the lights come on. It's hilarious to watch if you have no skin in the game. But I like that aspect of it. Ellen's character is great. I mean, again, just I felt like it was a very even cast. Like, everybody has their place, and of course that's also the writing and directing, but man, they just play so well together. Like, they just work so well. Oh yeah, Deke, of course, too, is great. I can't. What was his? Who's the actor who plays him? He's not here on the front page, so sorry, Deke. But no, all of the characters. I just really appreciate the evenness of the cast in that way. Like, everybody gets a little time to get their business in. Yeah, and in season 1, I think that's not a little thing, because it's really tough to do character moments in an origin story, because that's what you're kind of doing.
Chris Bauer. That's Deke
Chris
Sleep.
Bauer. Good old Deke. But yeah, and I'm just going to go right out. You might have these, but I don't. I don't really have any bad or any ugly. I got nothing. Maybe a little bit of that, like, yeah, the parenting is a little bit overboard in just how bad it is. But I really don't have much bad to say about it. You know?
Yeah, the season overall, I mean, there's very little, fat to it, and there's very little to say was bad. I think everything had its place, like you said, everything had its purpose, and it was, I think it was well done. I think when I put as a nit the parenting, it's just, it feels so overboard. Like, to the point of, just put a sign up saying, this is the heel, sort of like that's what I kind of felt like sometimes with it. It just felt like so just unnatural. You know what I mean? Like I again, I know there are people who have gone through probably much, worse sort of situations than probably what I grew up with. But, I guess I just really have a hard time seeing people who are trying to, put forth an idea that they're a family and that they're a happily married couple and turning into just these monsters when it came to their kid, because that's really what they both were, I mean, not in a violent way, but just in a almost psychologically damaging way, and the death of their son isn't, due to a suicide or anything like that, but it was, more him trying to kind of do the things that he loves, and them just being so kind of absorbed in their own worlds and in their own problems that they just lose sight of him, and there's just an accident, that takes place. And but just some of it was just, especially, and you see it kind of play out, I think in I think it was in season 3 with Ed, but the guilt that he kind of carries with, his last interaction with his son being that stern talking to, and just, I'm very disappointed in you, sort of thing. Like, that's the last thing he says to his son. Is just gut wrenching, but like I said, they do it in a way that it serves the point of the story and helps deepen the character. But there's just elements at times where you just feel like, man, this just feels out of the realm of reality, but sadly probably is. So
yeah, I think part of that, the reason why they go over the top on that, is because it's almost they're trying to kind of do like in Chernobyl. So the female scientist who is kind of the pairing of Jared Harris's, I can't remember his name, but that was not an actual person. Like, that character was an amalgam of all these different scientists, and they kind of like, well, we can't do this by committee. It's a, we only got so much screen time. So therefore, hey, we're going to create this character, and you're going to be a stand-in for all these other characters. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I feel like in some ways, like, okay, here's the bad parents. Here is, bad parenting in this way, and here's the bad parenting in Gordo and Tracy, and we're going to show both sides of this, and we're going to kind of go over the top because they're the stand-in for all of the bad parents. You know what I mean? So maybe that's part of the reason. So I kind of, not excuse it, I acknowledge the fact, it's kind of heavy-handed.
It's a real nitpick. I admit, it's a real nitpick.
Yeah. All right, so I think that's season 1, which represents really kind of late 60s, early into the 70s. And then, of course, the interesting thing about this is Ron Moore loves him a time jump. Loves him a time jump. I mean, we saw, the 1-year one in New Caprica, and then, of course, the largest time jump in the history of television, I think, of a couple 100,000 years in the season finale. But so then we jump from the 70s into the 80s with season 2. Right?
Indeed.
I got that right. Okay.
You did. And there was even kind of a post-credit scene at the end of the season 1 finale where they're playing, what's kind of nice is that at the end of each season's finale, they start to play the music of the times of the next decade. And so for the 80s, it was Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, which I think is just a great, first of all, just a great song in and of itself, but also, really a great anthem and indicative of kind of where things were going, for season 2. As well as the image of, like, I don't know what you felt, but when you saw that Sea Dragon rocket take off, I mean, that was that was like insanity. I'm like, man, they, to build something like that and to see, how far they've come technologically to basically have a rocket hosted in the ocean take off from, submerged is just insane. But very cool. And then that kind of leads us into season 2, where they start to expand upon and we start to see the same sort of regional, kind of, what do you want to call it? Like regional, or territorial is what I should call it, between America and Russia on the moon, and the tension that builds across season 2 to the point where we start to see weapons appear on the moon, and we start to see, we're going to have the shuttle, and it's going to have basically a missile bank, It's just kind of like, man, this is getting crazy, because it's almost like an amplification of everything happening, kind of on the planet, taking place in space now between America and Russia, and with a real, kind of ramping up of just tensions between the two nations, to the point of where there's like this really serious, threat of there being like a nuclear attack. And so, so I think, the progression, through to the, what we see the characters doing and how we see them 10 years later, was really well done. I think, Karen kind of being more, completely breaking out of, that mold of the astronaut's wife, and clearly being her own person, running the bar and all of that, and running her own business and kind of doing her own thing, kind of finding her way. I thought it was interesting to see the toll it takes on the marriages and the family with, Gordo and Tracy, separating, but, ultimately it kind of being a story about them coming back together and having, probably what was, I think to date still probably the most emotional part of the show was their moonwalk to save everyone, which resulted in ultimately their death in season 2. And I thought it was just really, a great arc for the characters. Gordo going from, I mean, let's face it, BSG had fat Apollo, we had fat Gordo. So.
Oh yeah. Oh, Gordo let himself go. Oh my gosh. And Tracy glowed right up. I mean, they were heading in such different directions.
Oh my gosh.
And the
Gordo
hairstyle.
does a mini Rocky training montage during the season.
Yeah. It was missing everything but the music. Oh yeah, he was getting after it.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And you got to figure, I mean, it's even more impressive when you add in the weight of the mustache, because that added a couple pounds. I mean, right there. And he's running with that. That's like running with 5-pound weights on your legs. You really should get more credit for that. But yeah, that was great. I did appreciate, like, my good for season 2 really was, again, just kind of continuing out that idea of like, okay, what if? And this idea of, well, now the Russians have the upper hand. They're out for, getting resources and things like that, and they don't have the, because of their success, they're able to continue going, and the USSR does not implode. It doesn't fall apart, because that was one of, they really, part of what bankrupted the USSR was their space program, to a degree, and trying to build their own shuttle and things like that, and they just couldn't do it. And the fact that we see this continue, I was like, man, this is really interesting how this would work. And and of course, then you get into the idea of like, well, you got Russians and you got Americans on the moon. This is probably going to be kind of tense. Yeah. And that was just very. That whole thing was very interesting to me, and it had me hooked right from the beginning. And again, I totally agree with what you're saying too. Like the toll it takes on families, especially the Tracy Gordo deal, where of course, when women are brought into the space program in season 1, and Tracy kind of becomes the belle of the ball and surpasses Gordo. And now, like, that tension is a whole other brand of stuff going on. And the whole thing was just great. And then, of course, Molly, doing her thing on the moon, getting irradiated to an incredible degree. Trying to save that other dude.
That was really well done, the way they did that.
That was an amazing
you could see
scene.
the ripples in the sand, to kind of emphasize what was happening on the moon's surface and what she was doing.
That was really... one of the tensest scenes.
Yes,
for something that was not really like, and again, not to kick it Picard again, but hey, why not? My leg is warmed up. Everything does not have to have universe-ending
galactic
consequences.
Import.
It doesn't. Like, that really was just affecting her and this dude, but yet the tension was there. And why was the tension there? Because you knew Molly. You knew that character. Right. There was an investment there. You didn't really need to know the other guy. He was essentially a red shirt, but you knew her. So there was something at stake there, and did it so well. Yeah, and the scene with Gordo and Tracy, in that spacewalk to save everyone. My gosh, yeah, another just magnificently done scene, and totally done, and totally creates that tension that other shows try to manufacture by, the music and then taking the situation over the top. It's like, no, it's because of the characters, dummy. We care about them because we know about them. They've made them compelling, and we've spent time with them.
Yep.
That's why the tension is there. Like, yeah, you can ramp up the music. You could have done that almost without music, and it would still be tense as hell. Like, because you're just like, oh my gosh, are they going to make it? Are they going to make it? Then are they going to make it back? Yeah, right. No. Those were all definitely my goods.
I love the integration. So from a history standpoint, Reagan, goes till 84. Then you have, I think Gary Hart goes from 84 to 92, which, again, is really funny that they go with all of the, kind of scandal-ridden presidents end up, or candidates end up, kind of achieving their goals or surviving outside of the realm of a scandal. I don't know if you picked up on this, but I found it interesting that, and Margot says this several times, being the director of NASA, that, NASA is actually kind of self-funded now, like it's not a government, where it's relying on government funds. It's basically funding itself, I think, because of the progress made on the moon. And I think, some ways that they're making money, which I thought was, an interesting way to explain how they're able to innovate and continue to grow, because, like you said, I mean, any government supporting, a program, solely on its own is ultimately going to have limits, to what they can do. And so it just kind of spoke to the progress they made and the way it could be done. And then I really liked how they worked in the, let me find the flight, the Korean airline flight that gets essentially, shot down in our reality, ends up playing a big role because one of the main players in NASA is on that plane. And we end up finding one of our characters, Ellen, could have been on that plane, does not end up on that plane. And so, one character dies, one kind of survives. And so, so I just thought it was kind of interesting the way they play kind of with fate and chance and that sort of thing, and how it plays into, a lot of these characters and what ends up happening and what doesn't. The biggest thing from the 80s too, which I thought was really kind of interesting, was, and this is where we see Margot's first step into, kind of the gray area a little bit, is, we unfortunately have to live with the history of the Challenger disaster. And in this reality, they actually catch that error, earlier on, without a flight having happened and without a crew having to die. And, the fact that Margot goes and kind of indirectly to the Russian liaison she's kind of talking with, shares that information of, you may want to check on this thing, I thought was really... Like it really impacted me, because, it was such a not a stretch for her character, but it was such a gutsy move by her character. But B, it's like, I was sitting there and I said to my wife, I'm like, she's basically making sure the Russian program doesn't die. Because and not that the Challenger program, killed, the Challenger accident killed NASA, but I mean, it was a major setback. And
oh yeah, totally.
And had she not said that, they would have had their own launch. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just got to disconnect again and then a reconnect. So sorry.
No, I'm still here.
All right. But just the impact of all that, because she could have let the Russian program fall flat on its face, and it continues to go on and have the success that it does because she prevents it. I thought was really powerful. It's a powerful sense of, the character who ends up dying in the Korean Airlines flight. I forget his name. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, me too. I actually.
Thomas
I kind of forgot
Paine
about
is the
that
character's name. Is trying to do this whole thing about being a city on the hill and kind of trying to make peace and moving forward with the Russians instead of against them. That's kind of a thread that goes throughout the season. And I think it's just a really great theme and how she kind of manifests that in the choice she makes to kind of in reality kind of go against her country, but doing so when you think about it in the larger sense of humanity for all mankind, what the show is called, she really does the right thing. And is trying to do the humane thing. And so I like that the show deals with those sorts of really difficult, decisions and questions that the characters have to face. So I thought that's something I just really enjoyed with season 2.
Yep. I would totally agree. Not a whole lot bad. And the only nit I have to pick, I don't know how you feel, sir, is, the whole, like throughout the seasons, Margot and Alita's relationship is kind of strange. Margot has a chance to take her in as a teen, and she chooses not to. And then it's kind of ironic for her to go back and kind of pull her out of the squalor she's kind of living in to give her a job and kind of set her up. And really, Alita's story is great, being, kind of an illegal immigrant who comes in, eventually makes her way, but is an extremely bright young girl who becomes, a mission coordinator, mission director. And, just their complicated relationship I found kind of interesting in season 2, but frustrating because it seemed like, for someone who's willing to help the Russians not fall flat on their face, why would you not help a girl? You know what I mean? It's kind of an interesting, thing where she makes that decision. And then the other thing was just the whole Karen and Danny thing that ends up happening where she is clearly, kind of finding her freedom and finding her identity in herself, and decides to have a little fun with her best friend's son. So yeah, that's that
was a little uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm gonna guess that stuff like that has happened, and no, I agree. I think now that you say it, Margot and Alita, I do think that is kind of an inconsistency. There is a bit of a blip there. I'm sure it's done for a reason. I'm sure probably the reason is like, well, Margot is an injured individual, and she was kind of rejected and by von Braun and all these things, and I'm sure that there's something there, but it almost feels like it's a little too cute. Like you're trying to put an Echo in there when you really don't need to. But then again, it makes me wonder just how much you kind of have to have Margot as this person who is putting out this facade that is this, well, she is this person. She is abrupt, and she is not necessarily, gonna be touchy-feely and all this, and she gets stuff done. But that also makes her intensely lonely, and she has this dude that she's kind of friendly with, but she can't be friendly with this other person because then she has to see her every day. She doesn't have to see, Sergei every day.
Right.
So, right. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of bigger thing in there that I'm missing. Yeah, that's a minor thing. I would probably agree with you there.
Not like there are no lows, I think, in that season really. I mean, it's the Karen and Danny thing is just it's just a when my wife and I are watching, we're like, I really hope it's not going to the place that we think it's going to. And then, we get to the next episode. It's like, oh no, they're going to that. Oh my God, they went to that. Oh, sweet Moses.
Yep. They done went there. They done did.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, it is really difficult to find, it's not a perfect show, but it's really hard to find something genuine to complain about, quite honestly.
Yeah, I don't see any gaping holes, any kind of red flags anywhere, really. It's solid. It is solid. 100%. It was done with a lot of care.
100%. I just love the fact they made a shuttle with missiles.
Oh yeah, totally. That's so freaking cool.
Hysterical. I'm like,
that's awesome.
Things are getting real here. We got weaponry now on this thing. It's like we're like one phaser away from the Enterprise. So
damn close. All right, sir. So now we bring ourselves to the 1990s, the land of flannels and grunge and questionable hairstyles. Here's season 3
for some,
for all mankind, and we find ourselves. We've got a hotel in space. We've got a cult of personality happening with some sort of CEO, visionary. We got all kinds of stuff happening here.
Oh yeah.
What would you say is what are your goods from this season? What'd you really like?
I really like the economy of the storytelling. There is across, I think, 1 or 2 of the episodes, the journey to Mars. Before I forget, really like the transition from season 2 to season 3 musically, where they use Nirvana's "Come As You Are."
Yeah.
Especially,
although that has kind of become a go-to. It's almost like every Vietnam movie would use, either Ball of Confusion or Run Through the Jungle. Yep. It's got to be one of those two.
Yeah.
But they did it very well here. Yes.
Well, and just the image at the end of season 2 with Margot standing at JFK's, not graveside, but memorial, with that song playing was just very eerie. And not foreboding, but just, given everything that happened in 2 going into 3, just felt right. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I have a nit to pick, or I wouldn't even call it a bad, for season 3 and its transition to 4. But overall, we come into the 90s with really the goal being Mars, and and not only Mars, but I found it really interesting that now we're starting to see, because of the progress made in space, it is now having repercussions down on Earth where workers from different energy fields are now suffering because they have discovered this element, or this material, helium-3, up in the moon that is now becoming this much better energy source, source of energy for power on Earth. And so now it is putting out of work a big chunk of the energy sector, and so now you're starting to see a lot of unrest because of the innovation and the progress made through the space race, which I thought was kind of, interesting, and, not completely out of character for the 90s. It feels like, even though the history has forked a little bit in this series, there's still, undertones of thematic elements that we lived through that are still coming through. And, we'll get into the big event at the end, that really kind of, blew, well, sorry, not to make a pun, blew me away. See what I did there? But no, I mean, the whole idea of a hotel in space was just seemed insane to me, but was well done. I mean, like you mentioned with Pacific Rim, they do things logically and, and have some grounding to it. And so I thought, the way it started out, the way it plays out, a lot of the, the whole race to Mars, I thought was interesting. I absolutely love the fact that rather than having a person step on the surface of Mars, you have 2 people tumbling out and basically doing a wrestling roll through as the first contact on the Martian surface. So
yeah. That seems much more in tune with just human beings in general, doesn't it?
Yes.
Like that sounds like I saw that and I'm like, yep, that's pretty much how I think this would play out.
Well, and that's exactly. I said to my wife, I'm like, it's so funny that the way they play out this historic touchdown on this on another planet is by showing how childish we as adults can be.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, like, and maybe I'm being biased toward the Danielle character, but I understand, like there was a part of me that was really getting frustrated with the Russian contingent because of the fact that, again, it's a strange tug of war where it's like, had they not gone and saved them,
mm-hmm.
they wouldn't be where they were.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And yet, because they're alive, they feel they can, kind of leverage their freedom on or just exercise their freedom on others and do what they want. And it just it all feels very childish in the end, you know what I mean? And that's something that I just think they do a really great job of kind of showing is even these adults in this completely new world, in this new place that they've all been striving to get to, can act like absolute jackasses when they get there.
Oh yeah, I love that. Absolutely, because again, it's so anti-Star Trek, which again is so much of what Ron Moore has done since working on Star Trek. Like, I don't have to follow those rules anymore. Sweet. Yep. Every show is going to have a scene in the bathroom.
Yep.
Because we can never show a bathroom, and it's always, and everyone's working together. It's like, I love how this is looking at the world that I've known the past 46 years. This is totally how that would play out.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, true. That was great. That was absolutely great. I really liked how, just sort of the introduction of the private sector into things and how that's like, that's the next logical step. It isn't just going to be, USA, USSR. Eventually, there's going to be a private company or private companies that are going to try and get in on this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I like how we start exploring that. Like, that made a lot of sense to me. And it also gives you a new character and a real wild card in this whole thing. And again, that even gives you a good excuse to go back and revisit some of those relationships between the characters that we've learned so much about. And it gives you a logical reason to go back and revisit those relationships, not just like, you said something to me, like, they're beyond that point. Like, these two people could like probably punch each other in the face and it'd be fine.
Yeah.
But when you then pit these things with this third entity out there, now all of a sudden, whoa, what's happening here? Now it changes the dynamic, and it does it in a logical way. I like that. Yeah, and I like, again, how it is a logical thing. Like, okay, now we're both on the moon. All right, now who's going to get to Mars first? Because it's always it's the next thing.
Yep.
And I really enjoy that. Yeah, and the race for Mars was great. The deploying of the sail. I thought that was a great moment. Just, it was fun. Like in a series that it is serious. It's a drama, and there's some humor. To me, that was like the goofiest thing that they've done, but they pull it off because they're not asking you to do that. It's almost like with the episode of BSG where Ellen Tigh shows up and they're having dinner and all that. Like, it was as close to like a comedic farce as you'll ever get. And it works because they're not doing it every damn week. They pull that out every so often and things like that. And I like how they're like, you know what? Let's do something goofy right here. Yo ho! I'm like, oh, you know what? Damn right. Go on with your bad self. I love it.
Well, and I love too, like with the 90s, how some of the innovation and some of the changes we see in technology are accelerated. The whole idea of the dev character and Helios Aerospace, and like you said, that private sector kind of coming into play has a real, for me, it has a real kind of feel of like what Google must have been like potentially. But I know for today, people probably watch that storyline play out and it's like, oh, that's like Elon Musk and Tesla, because he has SpaceX going on, and he is a private company that is trying to do, space, sort of activities. But showing also how, at the end of the day, even though, Dev seems like this person who is about the people and about the community, really at the end of the day is about himself and what he wants. It's just very manipulative the way he goes about doing it. And or the way he kind of spins decisions being from the people or from the group as opposed to himself, but really kind of like cattle herds everyone in that direction.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was really well done. It was interesting to see all of the changes in relationships happening. Ed jumping over to like jumping over to Helios. But when I saw him, I love the actor who plays Ed and how well he portrays Ed as happy-go-lucky one moment when he thinks he has the mission under his belt, to looking like the saddest man on the planet when he finds out that Danielle gets it, and he's just this mopey, this mopey lug who can't be happy for his friend in any sense. It's just like, forget this.
Oh yeah.
And then to just, to kind of just follow that path of, I'm going to go do this and this is what I'm going to be. I thought it was great payoff for the Danielle character to have her finally, be, as an African-American being, the pilot and being the commander of this mission.
Because before this, they only gave her the one command was like to the mission that nobody, like right. the capsule that's like, oh yeah, we're going to take this out of storage. Here, you're the commander of this tin can that we used like 15 years ago. Like, gee, thanks.
And she ends up being part of one of the most critical pieces of, like we didn't cover this in season 2, but I mean, the America and Russia were literally at the edge of nuclear war. And, she becomes part of this handshake, this sign of friendship between the two countries that ends up influencing both leaders to stand down, take a breath, and kind of move forward in a more peaceful direction. So it's interesting to see how she plays such a pivotal role in some of these ways, and yet is, has continuously been relegated. And now finally in season 3 gets, kind of her due in terms of being, the leader and commander of this very, very groundbreaking and critical mission.
Yep.
So yeah, no, I think they did a great service to her character. I thought the action on Mars was well done. I like how it stayed away from the Martian piece of it a little bit. The movie The Martian, about all the survivability aspects of things, and just I like how they kind of gloss over some of the technical complexity that goes into doing missions like this, and just kind of assumes technology covers it and focuses just on, as you've said to me and texted to me many times, how it focuses on the characters. It doesn't get burdened by trying to explain how can they do all of this stuff. They focus on the story and the characters, and you don't even really care about it in the end. Mars is just a backdrop for everything going on with the characters, and I think it's just again a credit to the writing team and the producer and directors.
Yeah, and another thing I think they did really well is they finally kind of pay off a couple of ticking time bombs that have been ticking for an awfully damn long time. The longest ticking time bomb is the White House recordings, which apparently I didn't realize this. I think the original installation of a recording device in the White House was actually when JFK was in office. But of course, we know it was really kicked into high gear by Richard Nixon. Well, because Watergate doesn't happen, and the Watergate tapes aren't a thing. The recording system is left in place, and so we hear throughout the seasons, we hear phone calls, we hear recordings in the Oval Office of the president speaking with different people. That has been sitting there, and they cut away to it enough times. I'm like, okay, this is going to bite somebody in the ass. Who it going to be? And we see when Ellen becomes president, boom, that bomb finally goes off. The same as the entire the entire subplot of what's her name? I just said it, Margot, and being groomed as a Russian asset. And then finally that coming into the forefront. Like, it's like, okay, now it's like, here are these things that have been ticking away, and now they're going to start going off. And I like how they paid those off, and just how damn patient they were in paying those off. Because it would have been so easy in season 2 to have the whole Margot thing sped up because you're worried about it, or to maybe say like, oh, and they discovered it with Reagan. You know, the taping device in season 2, they could have done that early, but they waited. And the fact that they waited until Ellen is president, you know, first female president, and then this pays off, and it pays off in a way that then also pays off the ticking time bomb of who she is, like her sexuality. You know, the fact that she is a lesbian, and that she has been posing with this other dude who's gay, who's a gay man, and they're a couple, and they have a child, and you know, this whole facade that's been going along in order to further her political career, and now all of a sudden it's all blowing up. And in that moment, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Like, what about this dude? What's going to happen with her? And all, and I'm like, it's insane how they pay all that off.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you also have the oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name. The character who comes out as gay on the Mars mission.
Oh yeah. Let me
kind of setting that whole thing in motion. Like, again, like it. You can say that's a reach, okay, fine, but there's going to be reaches. Like, it's not an unfathomable reach where you're like, oh, no way would this possibly ever happen. You know, like, okay, it's a reach, but we've gotten to a point in the timeline where, okay, not as much of a reach as you would think. You know what I mean? I like, again, how it's done in a logical and a very patient way. Like, they didn't, this is not microwave, television. This is like a very patient 7-course meal that you're getting here. And it's
Will
great.
Tyler. Character is Will Tyler.
Will Tyler. Thank you. I should have known, because I mean, his name was mentioned approximately 1 billion times in season 3. But but no, I thought all those were done really well. Do you have any nits to pick, any bad, any ugly for this? I don't have any ugly, but I might have some bad.
One thing I want to touch on real quick, and you just covered it, so just want to emphasize again, but throughout the seasons, the way they dealt with the struggles of those whose sexuality deviates, or goes in a different direction from where from where society is. I think they do a very good job of depicting the challenges there, and how that all, like you said, plays up into Ellen's role as president and what she eventually has to reveal, in a way to save her husband, but also to just kind of open up and be honest, and how, that ends up being a groundbreaking thing for her. I think it's interesting that one of the characters in the cast end up becoming, president, in the 90s, and not Bill Clinton. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, twist that they put into this kind of forked, history as well.
But they still managed to incorporate "Don't Ask, Don't Tell," which was
exactly,
if I'm remembering right, that was a Clinton policy.
Yes.
So it's a weird thing where some things do kind of happen in a similar time frame, but they happen in a different way. But it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, real quick, the big thing that I like it because of how it impacts the end of the season is the bombing that happens. Not that I like the bombing, but the fact that it ends up, like you said, I think one of the themes of this season almost was like these little things that have been festering for a long time blow up. And you have a group who is, for one reason or another, unhappy with NASA, who, again, it kind of relates to our time. You have some people who kind of believe in the sort of fictitious sort of theories of things that are going on. And it comes to pass in there being, this bombing that happens at the NASA location in Houston. And it ends up playing into, as you know, Uncle Todd and I have been texting about when I finally saw the finale. You know, Margot does this big speech at the end and kind of walks out, and the bombing happens. And so I don't know, like, we don't know going into season 4, is it presumed that Margot's dead? Do people know that Margot basically was acting almost in a traitorous kind of way by helping?
Well, one
the
sure shooting does.
What's that?
Well, actually, no, couple do, because Alita knew.
Yes, but Alita walked into her office and saw that her office was half blown to smithereens. So
well,
that's
yeah,
where
but I'm just saying,
wondering,
Bill Strausser.
Yep.
What was his nickname? Oh my gosh, he was he was the guy who peed his pants.
Now. Shoot.
Yeah, but
he peed his pants.
But I must have had me about 27 Dr. Peppers. But they knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a whole lot of questions posed there. So yeah, definitely.
And then, you know, Karen dies, which is huge because she's been, you know, since the beginning of this show started, such a foundational character, and seeing her evolution into this very strong, you know, CEO level kind of, you know, person who, you know, has control of her life and so forth. And, you know, she gets caught up in just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It'll be interesting to see the implications in season 4 as we understand how time plays out. You know, there's a group in Mars who are needing to come back. You know, there's a ship in Mars that needs to come back, and mission control is now destroyed. You know, so how does that impact, you know, America's space program? How does that impact Russia's space program? What is the next thing for them? You know, are they going beyond Mars when we get to the 2000s? Or
well, I think I know how it impacts Russia's space program, because we get ourselves a post-credit scene that kind of just kicks you right in the keister.
Oh, it does. Oh, it does.
Margot wakes up someplace that we ain't expecting.
But as far as nits, my nits, like, I don't have any lows really, but I think my nits primarily sit with the Stevens boys.
Yes. I was hoping we were going to get to the Stevens boys. Oh my goodness. Dysfunction on 4 legs. It's amazing.
Gordo and Tracy, could you have done any better?
Well, the fact is they were only good parents in comparison to Ed and Karen, really. That was the only way that you looked at them, you're like, gosh, they're doing all right.
Oh
my goodness.
But you know, I'll start with the lesser of the two. Jimmy Stevens, the character, hairstyle just annoyed the heck out of me the entire season. I mean,
he was his father's son, really. That hairstyle was very much a Gordo thing. Like, oh, you inherited your father's hairline.
It's like
I'm
someone
sorry.
found a mop head and decided it worked as a wig or something like that. And I mean, he just put it on, and it didn't matter what angle, what orientation, it was just there. And no, you're like, good Lord.
It's more like a Halloween wig from a really cheap costume that got shoved underneath like a clothes rack, and then you found it like 3 years later and just shook it off and went, here, put this on.
It's like Michael Myers' mask without the mask, you know, just the hair from the mask. It's just, oh my God. So that drove me nuts.
Rough.
That drove me nuts, as well as his general behavior, because, you know, clearly the boys had issues with their parents, but it was just, I don't know that they've done enough to establish the angst. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't as much of a, there wasn't as much of an obvious nature to whatever the boys feel toward their parents as there was with Shane to Ed and Karen. You know, like Ed and Karen in season 1 were very clearly not doing a great parenting job. We didn't really see that with Tracy and Gordo, and we didn't really see it in season 2 with Tracy and Gordo. So all the angst from the boys is just kind of like, where did this come from? Because,
well, I mean,
yes, the parents split up, and yes, there was angst that went with that, but it just felt like, I don't know. I just kind of felt like it was not very well explained.
I get where you're going with that. I felt I didn't question it as much, mostly because I look at it from the standpoint of this. Your dad is basically an alcoholic who really, you know, is kind of living off of some glory days, and, you know, is a shadow of his former self, because he feels like he's just been totally outshined by his wife. And then your mom is, she's the I forget what they call her. But essentially just playing up the fact that, she's gorgeous and she's an astronaut and she's
like
this
America's
and that.
sweetheart.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And obviously, I don't think she's spending a whole lot of time with. I don't think either of them are really spending a ton of time with the kids. But it seems like they're like the Stevens boys are kind of living with Gordo more than anything, and are just watching their father just kind of disintegrate and be mopey and this and that. And you've got mom out there jet setting and all this stuff. And I mean, you take the divorce plus all of that, and I think there's a lot there. Not to mention, kind of what we learn of Danny, feeling some guilt about the death of, the Shane, and plus then also the guilt of everything that happened with Karen. I think there's enough dysfunction there that I get that. Mm-hmm. One of my bads is I feel like Jimmy Stevens gets played as such a doofus.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
how
okay,
is he even functioning as an adult in society, sort of thing?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's one of those deals where it's like he's so easily duped. Like, how is he even wearing pants? I don't get it. Like,
my pants.
He's like they totally just. But then again, I also get it. Like, he's a lonely dude who he's the younger son who is not. It doesn't seem like there's a lot expected out of him. Most is expected out of Danny, and Danny, they kind of go in the two directions. And I think you can kind of see this sometimes with like brothers or siblings, where it's like one is like just aims for the top and they're straight as an arrow and all this, and the other one's like, well, the pressure's off of me. I guess I can just do whatever I want. For however that works out. But I guess I felt like there was enough dysfunction there to explain it. I did kind of wish that Jimmy was a little bit quicker on the uptake, but I guess it also serves the story. Like, somebody has to be duped, and Jimmy being as kind of lonely and as much of an outcast as he feels, like, hey, this cute girl is just even talking to you. So he's in, even though he knows it's wrong.
She likes me.
My biggest problem with something tangentially to do with Jimmy is the fact that they get that fracking statue and they manage to steal it from NASA and they just throw it in the back of the pickup truck. Like, that thing isn't going to weigh a couple tons. Like, you think NASA's going to have like a paper mache statue out there? Like, that's not going to weigh a lot. And it's like right at the front door. Like, how do they manage to like make off with that? I'm imagining that NASA has some sort of a gate.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then it's just never that kind of bugged me. Like, okay, that's the thing that to me is like, okay, now you're getting into this. I'm sure that was some writer's thing, and maybe it was Ron Moore's thing, and he just decided, you know what, I'm playing with house money. Let's do this. I don't know.
You know what that
to
statue
me that
reminded
was like,
me of? When
what?
On The Simpsons they did a spoof where I think they had like a stone statue of Jimmy Carter that on the bottom of it said Malaise. I saw that. I mean, Gordo and Tracy dying is an emotional moment in the show, so I'm not trying to make light of it, but it's just when I saw that statue, I'm like, it just seems like such a cool, like, I get doing the statue for them, but it just felt kind of I don't know, a little bit out of place.
Yeah. I think the only real thing that bothered me is the North Korean astronaut or cosmonaut being on Mars for like seemingly forever in that little capsule.
The Martian,
with like
man.
Unlimited. Well, he's not growing his own potatoes and crap. Like, he's living in essentially like a small clothes closet with how much food and where's he getting air from? Like, to me, there was just so many holes in that. Like, okay, like, they got him there. First of all, I want to know how they got a space capsule from, a rocket from there to there, and I get it. Like, they're like, oh, it was strung together and it's really rickety and all this, and he can't even communicate back or anything like that. Okay, fine, I get all that, but all of that is so rickety, but yet the life support is other level where he has unlimited air supply and unlimited food. Like, has he got a replicator in there or something? Like, where is all this coming from? You know, that was the one thing to me that took me out. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. In a show where most everything you can kind of explain in a logical way, this thing right here is giving me a funny smell.
Although one thing they don't really explain ever is how all of the habitats have gravity.
Well, yes. But then again, that's one of those things.
Past. You know what I mean? It doesn't ruin my view or my grounding in the show. You know what I mean? It's just I kind of accept it as, okay, they must have the tech for it. But it is kind of funny when you said about, you know, how the life support is other level. It's like, yeah, all these habitats, no matter what happens to them, they seem to be just fine with gravity.
Oh yeah, and I think at one point he's actually like tossing the cans down into like the footwell. I'm like, those would be floating around. You know, now that you say that, yeah, no, totally. But that is one of those things where you just have to go, okay, yeah, it's, you know, whatever. It's like why there's sound in space. Like that's not a thing, but it seems weird if you don't, because we've seen enough movies that have sound in space. But yeah, that to me was kind of bogus. I'm going to guess that you have at least one ugly. Because you've talked about one of the Stevens boys a bit, but you really haven't dug in on the other one. And I know that you have some problem. You have some. There's people who have daddy issues. You've got Danny issues. So why don't you just share with the group?
You know me,
share
Gene,
with the group.
What I can't stand. No, like seriously, like Danny Stevens, that character just wore on me as the season went on, and.
Which was great hearing, like having you text me like every 3 episodes, like, I can't stand this guy.
Here's the thing.
Airlock him. Why don't we?
Honestly, my wife, God bless her, is becoming like Madame Airlock when we watch the show. She's like, I wish they'd just put him out of the airlock. It's like,
where's
amen.
Laura Roslin when you need her?
And you spoke on this, so I don't want to relitigate it, but I think with the Tracy Gordo and their boys dynamic, maybe there wasn't as much of a lens put on it as maybe there needed to be to kind of, as an audience member, understand how messed up they are. Because, you know, clearly what he did with Karen was messed up in season 2, but they don't really give you any insights into him. You know, I mean, he starts as this bit character during season 2. They have their moment. He's devastated that she, you know, kind of blows him off afterwards. And, you know, season 3 is kind of like you see some of the repercussions, but it's like 10 years later. And it's not to say that those things still wouldn't be there, but it's just like, then you see him spiral back into drug use and all this other stuff. And you're just kind of like, okay, but help me understand, why are you feeling this way? You know, I mean, yes, I understand your parents were divorced and they died, you know, when you were still young. And, you know, those are definitely things that can impact a young person. But when you, I don't know how else to describe it other than like going back to like the season 1 and the Ed and Karen example, it's like there was a focus that was put on Shane. You know what I mean? And I don't feel that same focus was put on the Stevens boys to understand how messed up they are.
Well, I think they did that later on. I mean, when you think about it, how much screen time did Shane really have? Like, we didn't. It's not like because I know they had a kid, but it's not like I could. Not like I can even tell you what he looks like or anything.
But the impact of his parents on him, we saw. And so you could draw a line to say, okay, I'm seeing why this kid is rebelling, or I'm seeing why this kid is doing this, why he would run off to his basketball game, even though she told him to stay home. I could see why. The Stevens boys are a different story. And so in season 3, you know, Danny's, you know, he's given focus. He's being given the limelight to kind of show, you know, how this stuff has been impacting him. But I feel like there wasn't really a buildup to it to kind of know that this powder keg was going to go off. And so my comment to Uncle Todd while I was watching season 3 was, I was really concerned they were going to go down a path where Ed, you know, ends up getting killed or something because Danny, through either being in a drug-induced, you know, state or something else, and it almost happens with the drilling incident. Mm-hmm. ends up killing him inadvertently or killing him because he wants Karen. And I'm like, this takes the show in a totally different direction for me. That like this becomes like a Melrose Place, Beverly Hills 90210 sort of thing. You know, it's like, this is not what the show was about. Thankfully, they didn't do that. And thankfully didn't go in that direction. And it seems like they're trying to chart him on a course where he's going to correct himself and you know, get better. But it was playing with that possibility for a period of time where I just was like, please do not do this, because it is such a it's not that Ed as a character has to be protected from death, but it feels very against the spirit of the show to have him killed because this kid is obsessed with his wife. That just feels totally off the realm of where the show is supposed to go.
Well, yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, and that was the threat. However, and it was, it was a threat, and it didn't end up happening, and for the best.
Right.
I would say, I think I'm not sure what else you want, because the thing is, like you say, oh well, the parents got divorced, and then the parents died, and but the parents died in like one of the most public ways possible. When your parents weren't that great, but now everyone thinks that they're the greatest thing ever, and you're like, I could see where it would turn and really mess you up. That like your parents as this, these people as this, but everyone else thinks that they are, are a hero. And I mean, the thing is, I have seen this, and I won't go into any details with this. I've seen this in my life happen, not to me personally, but I've watched someone go through it, of that disconnect of what that person knows about a person and what other people see of that person, and how it is trying to reconcile all of that and still have a relationship or still just piece through all of those feelings. That is a lot to deal with. And I could imagine, especially and that's for someone, you're dealing with two people who are kids. I think they were maybe early teens.
Yeah.
I mean, but they were young enough that, I mean, you're still in a formative time. Like, I could see that completely jacking up somebody's, emotional development, and really, putting them in two different places. Like, Jimmy just is like, I just don't care. And Danny's like, well, I must now achieve, but I'm also going to drive myself and do it in I'm not going to address any of the stuff that is bothering me. And therefore it's still going to be bothering me 10 years later, because I never addressed it. I just pushed through it, and I'm doing the things that I should do, even though mentally and emotionally I ain't all there.
I mean, they do give him some moments, admittedly, during season 3 where he talks about, being an astronaut and doing this is something that he, it wasn't of his own desire, but it was to live up to be something else, and so they do try to do service to it. I don't know, something just didn't hit me right with it, and it just really bothered me for, a period of time. Now, they do right the ship toward the end. Are you there?
Yes.
All right. It says offline for me on Zencaster.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay. But you can hear me still.
Yep.
Weird. Okay. Well, we'll just keep going. No. So they do right the ship with him, but and they seem to be, taking him in a direction, but of course, where we leave him and where things end up in the 2000s is, yet to be known with season 4. So overall, I mean, I think it was, I think one of the things they did a nice job during the season subtly of establishing, though, is finally, kind of that camaraderie and that peace between these different nations on Mars. Because when we leave them all, they're all surviving together, the Russians, the Americans, and the North Korean. And it really is kind of, quite a departure from where the prior 2 seasons were, where it was very much, season 1 was America playing catch up. Season 2 was, America and Russia kind of facing off on the moon, but ultimately kind of, establishing a sort of peace. And now in season 3, this sort of now collaborative, almost nature of their existence, because without it, none of them would survive. So I thought it was kind of an interesting way to end things. For me, there really wasn't a whole lot else bad with it. I think it was, again, economical storytelling, well done, and enjoyable.
Agreed, 100%. And for in your case, Danny has been put in timeout in the North Korean capsule, so all's well that ends well.
That's what I love, is like it's like putting baby in a corner. No, nobody puts baby in a corner, but plenty of people put Danny in the capsule, and that's all that we need, ladies and gentlemen. So good enough.
I'm fine with it.
Jimmy, get that hair combed.
Just get it shaved, dude. It's like a bad case of mange going on there. It's like a golden retriever that's way past its prime that probably is barely limping along day to day.
What's up with that?
What's up with that?
And another thing.
What do you got for and another thing this episode, sir?
Well, living the high life that I'm living, I went and threw some shekels at WWE 2K22 on the old gaming laptop, and have been having myself a little bit of a heyday playing that game. I was a big proponent back in the 2000s of the Raw versus SmackDown series, where a lot of innovation was done by the Ukes development squad over there, and just a lot of creativity, from create a character to create a belt to kind of being your own GM of a brand. They kind of brought all those things back. Apparently the prior outing, 2K20, was just resoundingly awful, very overly complicated in terms of the game control. Features weren't great. It just was resoundingly bad, and apparently they took 2 years to put out the next version, and this one is really a joy to play. Game control is great. The graphics are amazing. I mean, you literally have the wrestlers, if you have a match that goes for 5-10 minutes, the wrestlers are sweating during the match. You start to see it, and it's really kind of freaky and interesting. It's like, wow, this is kind of replicating real life, but I'm a little spooked by it, sort of thing. So, the creation modes are a lot of fun. It's so vast. You can create a wrestler's entrance. You can create a wrestler. You can create an arena. You can create a show. You can create a belt. I haven't explored everything yet, but it's been a lot of fun kind of, playing it and just, getting to, do some cool things with the game and the freedom that it gives you. The detail in the belts is pretty amazing. Again, similar to the wrestlers themselves, the attention to detail is really, really amazing with the graphics. So I would just highly recommend it if you're a fan of WWE and combat wrestling sort of games. It is a lot of fun. It is very game control is much more simplified, a lot of fun to play, a lot of different modes to play in, and you will not be disappointed. If anything, you will be thrown by how much time goes by, and it doesn't feel like it's all that much, but it's been like 2 hours. So be careful, tread lightly. That is my recommendation.
Alrighty. Well, good enough. Well, I'm going to go in a different direction. Tim's going with the latest and the greatest in video games. I'm going way back, way back to 1992 for my and another thing, for the album Never Been Rocked Enough by Delbert McClinton. This is filed under country, which is kind of funny. It does have definitely a country tinge to it. However, Delbert is an artist that kind of has his toes in a few different genres. There's definitely some more than a little blues in there. There's also a little bit of rock. There is a little bit of country. There's a little bit of rock. Even a little bit of funk in there.
We like both types, country and western.
Well, and the funny part is, as I'm sure that you're aware of, the Blues Brothers in their on their Briefcase Full of Blues album have a song called B Movie Boxcar Blues. which you remember that? That is a Delbert McClinton song. So there we are tying those two together. But this was his 1992 release, and it's probably the biggest song off of this. I've seen it in a couple of different playlists and things like that. Is a song called "Every Time I Roll the Dice." Great little rockin' kind of number. I am now actually more of a fan of the second song, which is "I Used to Worry," which is just great lyrics, just funny. And go ahead and listen to it. I'm not going to spoil them for you. There's a little bit of reggae at the end with his cover of Bob Marley's "Stir It Up." And also the cover of a song, "Have a Little Faith in Me." And in between there's a bunch of other songs that just very biting, clever lyrics. And Delbert's voice is just so much fun. Just the way his growl and the way his voice breaks a little bit. To me, it reminds me of when you're playing guitar especially. But for me, it's more when I would play harmonica, you want to be playing an overdrive and kind of get the sound to break up. So you get kind of a little bit of distortion, but you do it if you have a tube amp, you're driving it so hard that the sound just kind of naturally breaks up in an analog sort of way without using a digital distortion pedal or something like that.
Nice.
But that's his voice. Like his voice just kind of has that natural sort of breaking apart, but in a really cool way. Heck of a songwriter, heck of a singer. Also, not a bad harmonica player at all either. He's got a bunch of different live albums, and in fact, on one of his live albums, he covers the Temptations' "Shaky Ground," which is amazing. But yeah, definitely check out 1992's "Never Been Rocked Enough" by Delbert McClinton. If you're looking just for something, 37 minutes, it's a quick album, but man, it's a fun one. It's a real fun album just to be driving along to.
Nice.
So give it a spin or a download, and get a couple shekels into Delbert's pockets these days.
Uncle Todd will not steer you wrong.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't go that far. Who knows? But I will not steer you wrong on this point. It is now time for us to shuffle on off back into interwebs land and do whatever we do the rest of our lives when we are not chatting with you fine folks. We'd like to thank all the members of the Free Range Idiocy congregation for gathering together, for listening to the holy scriptures of idiocy. We believe definitely in the power of redemption through idiocy, and really, we don't have a choice. That's our only hope, really. That's it. I mean, well, actually, Tim's a fairly decent person, but if idiocy ain't going to help me, I'm in real trouble, folks. But thank you for listening. Thank you for the downloads. Thank you for your continued subscriptions. If you have not subscribed, you can find all of our episodes at freerangeidiocy.com. You can download them all there, or even just listen right on the Podbean app. You can also subscribe through all the major podcast streaming services, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pandora, all of the Spotify, all of those fine folks. And, well, I don't know if they're fine or not, but yeah, you can get the show there. If you have any questions, thoughts, or concerns, what I want you to do is I want you to send those to Tim at Free Range Idiocy Congregation. Holy cow. Let me try that one more time. Tim at freerangeidiocy.com. How about that? And if you have a suggestion for a show, all the better. You might even hear us say words out of our mouth that you had suggested for us to say. You can follow us on the social medias. We are on Instagram and Facebook. Both those are at Free Range Idiocy. Twitter is still... the funny thing was, I mentioned that about, well, if I were Kanye West, they would have this fixed. And Kanye West just got his Twitter account frozen the other day. So,
so what are you saying? We're in questionable company, or...
Well, I mean, a little bit of both. I mean, apparently both of us are getting frozen out, so maybe there is more equality between me and Kanye. I don't know. But either way, follow us on Facebook or Instagram. And now it is time for me to hand over this little traveling medicine show of idiocy over to the the least idiotic of the two idiots on this show, and one who can actually speak English. But not before I ask the second, it's the first one. Dude, it's getting late here. I'm telling you right now, my stomach is grumbling. My meal schedule is all thrown off. Oh, I ate a piece of lasagna for lunch that was about as big as my head, and so now I wasn't hungry. up until like the past 25 minutes. In the past 25 minutes, my stomach is just going, feed me. Oh, it's wretched right now. But I'm going to hand this over to Tim, but not before I ask the second most important question ever uttered by humankind. The first, of course, being what is hip. The second being, what the hell did we learn this week besides my lasagna eating habits?
We have learned the following, my friend.
All right.
We have learned thou shalt not cross Neil deGrasse Tyson in any sort of physics realm, because he will layeth the smacketh down. He will drop the people's elbow. He will rock bottom you, as he has Top Gun 2, Tom Cruise, and ultimately Xenu himself. With that bogus ejection at 10.5 Mach. How dareth thee? We have also learned Uncle Todd has some strong feelings about Picard Season 3, and apparently the over-under is being set at 2 episodes. So,
yep.
No
now
more,
accepting bets.
no less.
There are 4 episodes. No, 2. 2. That's all you're getting, Patrick. 2.
Oh, my gosh. We have also learned, we're at about 2 hours and 45 minutes, maybe after this is edited down due to technical difficulty, 2 hours and maybe 35 minutes. I don't know, but Ronald D. Moore brings out the best in the free-range idiocy gentleman here.
Or the worst, depending on if you're looking for a timely podcast.
Sweet Moses. But this show is definitely good. Check it out. You will not be disappointed if you've listened all the way through. We have literally spoiled everything for you, so sorry about that. But if you are listening after watching at our behest, well done and well disciplined. And finally, as we like to close things out, be safe, be healthy, be kind, be good to one another. And, if for no other reason than, we just like to be environmentally sound and thoughtful. Heck, the man they call Tim owns an electric scooter. Would you please hit the lights on the way out?
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit drinking.
I beg your pardon, what did you say?
That idea is just the worst.
You're such a disappointing pair. I prayed so hard for you. Get out. And don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.
Hello, what have we here?
Ooh, that's a bingo.
Is that the way you say it? That's a bingo.
You just said bingo.
Bingo. How fun.
I just thought I'd love to hear that sound.
All of you relax. This is a matter of inconvenient timing, that's all. Police action was inevitable. And as it happens, necessary. So let them fumble about outside and stay calm. This is simply the beginning.
You know what I'm really disappointed about?
What are you disappointed about?
I have not gotten a call back from Warner Brothers about my idea about Chucky Batman.
I mean, that is gold. You were sitting on a gold mine, sir.
I know.
I don't understand it. Tells me the powers that be there, that 10-year plan, it's probably even more vaporware than the monorail from The Simpsons. So,
well, no, didn't they actually build the monorail?
Oh, they did. I think it summarily crashed, but
Well, but at least they built it.
That's true.
Ain't nobody calling me about Chucky Batman. I'm gonna reach out. I'm gonna reach right out to Ben Affleck. I've got to. Patrick, we got.
Whoops.
You got Affleck's phone number around here, right? No,
Really?
It's not going to be in the. It's not going to be in the. How did you even get a phone book? Do they even make those anymore? Let me see that. It's from 1989.
Oh, gosh.
Go use it to prop up your scooter.
I think Ben Affleck was living in Southeast still at that point.
I can only take so much more of this.
You know, you bring up the Chucky Batman, though. I have this vision of an Affleck lookalike wearing like a bed sheet around his neck, you know, some sort of cockamamie, you know, half Batman looking, you know, mask on, just running around, just pointing at people saying, "Yes, suspect."
Works for me. No, I want full on Affleck.
All right.
I'll see what I can do.
Price has to be right, probably, though.
Retainer.
Now get the hell out of here!